Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Orange Board of Education meeting, and welcome to West Orange High School. Mr. Calavano.
Roll call. Mr. Charles?
Present.
Mrs. Labb?
Present.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Present.
Mr. Robertson?
Present.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Notice of meeting. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided for in the following manner. That a written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 4 p.m. on January 6, 2017. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby of the Administration Building of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Calavano. May I please have a motion for the closed and public meeting minutes of May 8th, 9th, 10th, and 23rd, understanding that there may have been some absences?
I'll move that.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Calavano.
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Labb?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
And President Mordecai?
Yes. Okay, now it's time for the superintendent's report. Mr. JROTC.
Thank you. We're going to start, if I can ask the board members to just join the audience in the first row. We're going to begin with our Gregory Elementary presentation. They got a special phys ed and health presentation for us. Could I ask, yes, Principal Thompson, can you come on up, please, to the podium and explain what we're going to do? Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight, Gregory School, the Physical Education Department, will demonstrate some of the fitness components that we have been working on throughout the year. Every time there is a board meeting, you always see fitness awards being given out to different sports. But what we have to remember is it begins at the elementary level. So tonight, Mrs. Asman, physical education teacher, and Mr. Kozmowski is going to have our students show you some of the things that they have been working on this year. And I will turn it over to them at this time. Thank you.
Good evening. 10 Minutes of Fitness is a district initiative to develop health and skill-related fitness components in the elementary and secondary level in the physical education programs. Do you need me to lower this?
Good evening. Tonight the students will be explaining and demonstrating some activities that they perform in their 10 minutes of fitness to develop the 5 health-related skill components that are listed on that board, and also there are 5 health-related fitness components and the 6 skill-related fitness components over there.
Health-related fitness incorporates the 5 major components of fitness to improve health.
Skill-related fitness refers to components of physical fitness that contribute to the ability to successfully participate in sports. So athletes need to develop those things such as speed, agility, reaction time, balance. These posters were made last year, and they are posted in every gymnasium in the school district, and every physical education teacher does teach these components.
The students will now briefly explain each fitness component and demonstrate an activity to develop that component.
My name is Olivia, and this is our dash. Our dash will be performing hopscotch through the agility ladder to develop agility, and then slam a 6-pound slam ball 3 times to develop muscular strength and endurance in his arms. Would anyone like to perform the activity?
And the students are directing that at the Board of Education members, if anyone wants to come up.
My name is Emily, and this is Finn. Finn will be pushing a 10-pound weight across the floor to develop muscular strength and endurance in his legs. Would anybody like to perform the activity?
Yes! Woo! That was nice. Yeah. That was a good job.
You can do it!
Come on. Yeah! Yeah! Whoa! Yeah. That was good. Oh.
My name is Marissa, and this is Olivia. Olivia will be sprinting through the agility ladder to develop agility and then perform a squat press throw 3 times with a 4-pound medicine ball to develop muscular strength and endurance in the legs and arms. Would anyone like to perform the activity?
Hello, my name is Adarsh, and today Emily and Marissa will be developing balancing skills while standing on a balance beam and developing muscular strength and endurance in their arms by performing a chest pass with a 5-pound medicine ball. Thank you. Would anyone else like to try? Well, if not, well then this concludes our fitness demonstration for today. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you for watching our presentation.
No, we have other presentations. Okay, we're just going to move the agenda around a little bit. We're going to have the boys tennis team recognized next. Then we're going to recognize Victor Lopez and Andrew DePalma, and then we will finish with our JROTC program. It is really a pleasure to have the coaches and the boys tennis team with us. Coach Mazurek, who's a phys ed teacher in this building, and Coach DePinho, who is also a phys ed teacher at Kelly, did a phenomenal job this year. If you're not aware, we are the SEC division champs in the boys tennis, so please give it a round of applause for them. What we're going to do is ask both coaches to come on up, and we'll introduce the gentlemen. They come up, give you a plaque, and stand up front. We're going to get a picture. So you can just relax there for a minute, gentlemen. Your coach will call your name, and then you can come on up front to get a plaque. Coach.
All right, good evening, everybody. This year, the boys tennis team finished the season 13-6 overall, 8-0 in division play. We were SEC champions in our division. Really great season with a great group of guys, outstanding students, outstanding athletes, and just overall, just really great people. Pleasure to work with them. I'd like to thank Coach DePino. Did a great job with the JV team this year. I'll introduce the guys one at a time. Come up and get your plaques. Up first, we have freshman Shrey Sangvi. We have junior Xavier Abelson. Junior Kevin Zhang. Freshman Wolfgang Scheidinger. Sophomore. One of our second doubles players, junior Matt Carlos. Matt's partner at second doubles, junior Tanvir Qureshi. Tanvir was named to the SEC, All SEC Honorable Mention team this year also. At first doubles, we have Chris Randolph. Chris was named All SEC second team. His partner at first doubles, senior Sharia Sangvi. Sharia was also named second team All-SEC. At third singles and second singles sometimes, and I think first once this year also, we have Sam Sushi Kaplan. Sushi was named first team All-SEC this year. At second singles, freshman, he's going to have a very nice career here. Very excited about the next 3 years with him. Karam Belde. He was also named first team All-SEC. All right, last, not least, 2-year captain, 4-year varsity player, 3 years at first singles, Trey Cohn, also first team All-SEC this year. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Coaches, gentlemen, thanks for a really great year again. Congratulations. Well done. Very well done. Okay, we're going to recognize two individual athletes. Is Coach Sakella here? Okay, so what we're going to do, being that one of our board members had taught Victor Lopez early on, I'm going to just provide the record, and then I'm just going to ask Mr. Charles to come up and say a couple words about Victor. For those that are not aware, Victor has the overall school record with 136 wins, four-time district champion, and two-time region champion. 136 wins is the school record. No one has ever surpassed that. So, Victor, that's a phenomenal, phenomenal record. I know it's well-deserved, and he worked very hard. Let me ask Mr. Charles to come up and just say a few words.
On behalf of the board and the wrestling program here in West Orange, we just wanted to pay a little tribute tonight to Victor. But to me, it's a little personal because when I started coaching in the recreation program about 12 years ago and I took over the traveling team, Victor was one of the first kids that we had start in the program. He was like second grade, and we couldn't even get a singlet to fit him at the time. So to see him grow into the champion he's become both on and off the mat is a tremendous testament to the person, the young man that he has become. If you think about 136 school wins, if you're a four-year starter, do the math, how much you have to average. That's quite a feat. So on behalf of the wrestling community, and I'm sure that my colleagues on the board would like Victor Lopez to come on up.
Okay, our next recipient tonight obviously is here for an amazing feat as well. Andrew De Palma has a school record as well with 124 goals. And he also has 73 assists. So when you're playing lacrosse, the total points that Andrew was part of over his four-year career was 179 points. And when you look at that, you think about that, as Mr. Charles said, over 4 years, that's almost contributing 50 points per year, which is an amazing feat. Unfortunately, I don't see Coach here, and I apologize. Coach, he said some really terrific things, and I will just repeat what he told me about Andrew. One of the most coachable players that he has ever worked with, and listens and leads exactly what a coach is asking. It really is a tribute to Andrew and the hard work that he put in. And those are the words from the coach. And being that we have a brand new coach in the program and moving into this, it really is a testament to Andrew being someone who's in his latter part of his high school career to be able to adjust to a new coach, understand the philosophy, what the coach is trying to do, but also be able to contribute the way he does with the leadership, the scoring, and the assist is really something that we're all proud of, Andrew. So, Andrew, if you don't mind, come on up front, please. Okay, we're going to now recognize our Air Force Junior ROTC program. I just want to read a couple of the recognitions and accomplishments with this year and the program itself. Under Unit Award, Distinguished Unit with Merit Award, the highest award a unit can receive. Only 8% of units worldwide receive this honor. We're the only unit in New Jersey, to receive the award. Second, for the unit award, received the highest possible rating, which exceeds standards, on first ever Department of Defense inspection and evaluation. The inspector noted 15 best practices, things the unit are doing better than the other units he has seen. Please recognize the great work for the unit award. We may need to move the seats back here in the first couple of rows. So the last two individuals walking in, I'll just talk while you're taking some pictures, and I'll give you time to get up front. Farthest to my left, or when you're looking at the group, is Major Marcassini, and with him is Chief Thurston. And I will tell you that these two gentlemen are absolute class acts. They represent everything the uniform stands for, and the young men and young ladies standing in front of you are a perfect reason why when we say that West Orange High School is a great place to work and learn, this exemplifies what we're talking about. Please recognize all these individuals in front of us. Just a couple other things I want to recognize for our cadets. We have one U.S. Military Academy, obviously West Point appointment this year. We have successfully placed 4 cadets in the academies in the last 4 years. We have 2 4-year ROTC scholarship winners. We have nearly $1 million in total scholarships this year, and the cadets accumulated over 2,000 hours of community service. Thank you for all that hard work. I mentioned Major Marcassini and Chief Thurston. I just want to recognize that they were also awarded Outstanding Instructor Award, reserved by the top 10% in the nation. Major Marcassini also won the Outstanding Instructor of Year for Region 2, one of only 6 officers worldwide to receive this award, the top 1%. Congratulations, gentlemen. And before I bring up Major Marcassini and Chief Thurston to add anything, any other information they'd like to add, I'd like to recognize two cadets. They were awarded the second highest award in the Air Force Junior ROTC. If you're not aware, they received the Silver Valid Award for heroism by notifying the police and the firefighters who ended up rescuing two young children. So it's really an amazing story, and it just, again, kind of goes to the character of all those individuals standing in front of us. Could you please recognize Cadet Amir Richards and Ayanna Taper, please? Could both cadets just make their way to the front for 1 minute? I know this is against what we believe in as far as a unit, but I'd like both individuals to just step forward. One last time, please. Okay. If I could just ask Major Marcassini and Chief Thurston to come over to the microphone and add any words you'd like to, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to recognize our cadet corps this year. Thanks to the board members for doing the same. In the letter, I want to recognize Cadet Richards and Cadet Tapper, too. That's amazing. That's exactly what we talk about. On their way home, they saw a little kid dangling out a second-story window, and rather than just walk away and figure out things going to be okay, you know, one literally talked him off the ledge while the other one ran down a cop, and they were able to force entry into the building and save that kid. There was nobody home at the time, so who knows what would have happened to him. So good on them. That is a big deal, and that's stuff that Headquarters Air Force likes to hear, and that's why they're recognized. There's only about 13 kids in the whole nation that got recognized with those awards, and they were two of them. So it was a big deal for them and for all of us as well. But as Mr. JROTC said, the best awards are the team awards, and that's what we emphasize here. And distinguished unit with merit, it kind of has to be the perfect storm. Okay, the letter that came from Headquarters Air Force, clearly explained you can only get this award every 3 years. You have to have an inspection, and several things have to hit all on time and all on target, and it really did for us this year. Thanks to the hard work and efforts of these guys, we have so much of them, whether it's showing up for a community service event or chaperoning Liberty and Roosevelt's dances or whatever it is, or just showing up here tonight at the end of a school year to get recognized for something. Everything takes a little bit out of their time, and they show up, and they do it every time we ask them, everything we ask of them. So really appreciate the effort this year, guys. I know you're great. Looks like we have a lot up here right now. Next year we have double this number enrolled. So Chief and I don't need sleep, right? We don't need. So we'll be counting on these guys to train up the next corps of cadets and teach them the right way to be. So thank you, cadets, for a great year. You guys are great. Chief and I are very proud of you.
I would also like to follow up on the Major and say that I'm glad that I took the major decision. I interviewed for both East Orange and West Orange when I interviewed to become a ASI. And I came from a different background altogether. I used to be in manufacturing. But for some reason, my wife, my boss, my general decided that I needed to get out of manufacturing so that I can be home at night. She's probably looking at her watch right now. But I just want to say this. I'm glad that, as the Major said, the perfect storm fell in, that I got it selected here at West Orange. Not that I want to say anything bad about East Orange, but it's a good group of kids here. I'm the anvil. He's the hammer. Everybody thinks he's the easy guy. He's not. But I'm the big guy, so I'm the one that puts the fear in them, and they need fear. Everybody needs a little fear. So I just want to say this. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad you guys did what you did, because without you, there would be no need for me. Thank you.
Okay, when you are ready, obviously you can go ahead and go, and we're going to give you a couple minutes. So why don't we take about a 3-minute break, give everybody an opportunity that they can go home and get ready for school tomorrow. Any of the parents that are here, thank you very much for coming out for all the presentations. Parents, we're just going to take a 3-minute break. Talented presentation. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our supervisor for science, Stephanie Soriano. Stephanie.
Good evening. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for considering a new elementary science program. This is something that is needed because our state standards have changed. I'd like to also begin by thanking we had an elementary science committee that worked very hard this year. Their thoughts, their feedback, their attention to detail has contributed to our ultimate recommendation to the board for a new science program for September of 2017. So the state adopted the Next Generation Science Standards in 2014 with compliance for grades K through 5 in September of 2017. Our current program does not meet the needs or the rigor of that standard. So we have looked into programs. We have vetted a number of programs. I'm going to share both a little background about the standards themselves and the process that we went through as a committee. So the Next Generation Science Standards are based on the most current cognitive research on how students learn science. They were designed to provide students with the tools and skills necessary to succeed in a rapidly changing world. A solid science background prepares students to be informed citizens, knowledgeable consumers, and leaders in the workforce. The development for the K-12 science framework, which you see up there, is a book. It's a book that outlined not only what students should learn, but how they should learn science. 26 states, including New Jersey, worked on the standards. They were reviewed by a larger stakeholder team composed of hundreds of members, including educators, administrators, higher education faculty, scientists, engineers, business leaders, and policymakers. More than 10,000 people reviewed the standards. The standards are complex. They are not straightforward. There are 3 dimensions to the standards. As you can see up there, or I should see over here and stop turning behind me. The framework is divided into 3 dimensions: scientific practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. And I'll just give you a taste of each so that you understand that the standards are a matrix. They're a synergy of these 3 parts, all of which need an equal amount of attention in a classroom. The disciplinary core ideas are the things that students should know. This is the knowledge aspect. Life science, physical science, and earth and space science are the 3 disciplines, and engineering and design is a thread that goes throughout each. So there would be engineering and design aspects in all 3, life, physical, and earth and space science. The next dimension is called the scientific and engineering practices. These are the activities that students should be engaged in order to more deeply understand those disciplinary core ideas. What did you do in school today? These should be your answers. This is what I was doing in school today. These activities. If you take a look, there are two parts. Yes, you can see it up there. They're in red. Does anyone know what those pieces are? They're very simply the engineering dimension. They're the engineering dimension that was not there, not present at all in our previous standards. And that is defining problems and designing solutions. And what you'll see up there is a mixture of skills that are related to both language arts and mathematics. The Next Generation Science Standards does nod to the Common Core. They are not driven by the Common Core. They were not developed by the same people, but it does acknowledge where we can make some interdisciplinary projects and moves that way. Then there's 7 cross-cutting concepts. This is our third piece in our triangle. The 7 cross-cutting concepts are themes, and those themes can come through in each of the 3 disciplinary core idea areas: life science, physical science, and earth and space science. So we'll look for patterns. We'll get students used to cause and effect, the idea of scale and proportion, and how it's not limited to a topic. These are widespread themes that we'll see throughout science as we study it at all different levels. Again, this is a K-12, these are K-12 standards. So let's take a look at the current program. In terms of the content, teachers, and students, these are the areas we want to make sure are strong and shining in what we do every day. So with the current program, there's an emphasis on factual information. It is presented as somewhat of a disconnected series of topics. The scientific method, those 5 rigid steps, are present. When we took feedback from the K-12 framework, those 5 steps don't always happen in that order, in that nice, neat way in reality. And so the standards have adjusted that as well. Teachers are providing information, posing questions with only one answer, proving that cookbook labs are true. A lot of times we'll tell students, this is what's going to happen, and then I let all this great stuff out and I say, see, that's what happened. That's no more. That's no more. Students are asking questions first, trying to figure out those patterns first, and then teachers are supporting them. Currently, there is an emphasis on rote memorization, using the textbook as reading material, and answering questions at the end of a chapter. Let's take a look at the shift. For programs to be compliant with NGSS, these are some of the qualities that they would have. The content would have an emphasis on observing and analyzing phenomena. We want students to look around them and begin to use disciplinary core ideas to explain what's going on. Not to explain what's going on and say, see, there it is. That's why those fireworks are a different color. But to have them ask the questions. Why does that happen? Teachers are going to integrate scientific practices and cross-cutting concepts. Those are terms that students will know and become familiar with. They're going to implement inquiry-based activities that don't necessarily have a single answer. And they're going to facilitate discussions where there are multiple valid examples. Students, learning facts and terminology as needed. Front-loading vocabulary that doesn't have an anchor, that doesn't have a purpose or a reason for students to be curious about it, is no longer. Using systems thinking, not individual topics, but how do these topics create, let's say, weather. Students will actively participate, investigate, gather data, make and test hypotheses regularly. So again, here are the shifts. This is what we need. We had a very clear vision when we created our criteria for a new program. The shift to meet the NGSS. This is what the content needed. It needed to show those 3 dimensions explicitly. That shouldn't be hidden from teachers or students or parents at home trying to help. Presentation of phenomena is very important. We need to have students look at what's going on around them, make observations, ask questions. Those are all part of the science and engineering practices. The reference to NGSS must be explicit, anchored in disciplinary core ideas with a greater alignment for vertical articulation. The standards have incredible vertical articulation, meaning very precise. What you need to know about, let's go back to weather. What you need to know about weather in kindergarten is very specific. It builds on it in first grade. It builds on it in second grade. It builds on it in third grade. There is no skipping. It's very clear. It's by grade. Teachers are going to guide and create opportunities. They're going to question students' logic and data, present opportunities for students to investigate, and oversee and lead discourse with students. Students are going to be participating in those science and engineering practices. They're going to be asking questions, creating models, arguing from evidence, connecting phenomena to disciplinary core ideas. And they're going to communicate that science information in a collaborative manner. These are the elementary science committee members. We have 27 members. They are comprised of representatives from every elementary school. They also include representatives from special education as well as ESL. We also had Mr. Arcurio from Redwood as our principal to give perspective from administration. So that's our committee. We had a clear vision, and this is our process. The Elementary Science Committee met in November. We took a look at TCI, Knowing Science, Cengage, which is the company partnered with National Geographic, and FOSS. I selected these programs based on my interviews with different publishers, with all the publishers at the New Jersey Science Convention. These were the 4 that I felt were true and pure to the standards. So I used what's called the NGSS Primary Evaluation of Essential Criteria rubric, the PEC rubric. Publishers were evaluated for alignment to the NGSS standards and program needs unique to our district as identified by teachers. I took the PEAC rubric. Again, this is so new that even the national PEAC rubric is in draft form. I used the draft form. I met with teachers in November, and I said, what do you need? What do you need to support you to help students get where they need to be to meet the demands of these very rigorous standards? And I took those qualities. We put them all together. I'll show you those in a moment. Ultimately, the committee took the 4 companies that I put in front of them and narrowed them down to TCI's Bring Science Alive and the National Geographic's Exploring Science. They were going to pilot these 2 in the spring. This is the content criteria. These are the qualities that we looked for in the content. I'll just read a few out. Explanations of disciplinary core ideas and scientific principles are prominent. Again, incorporating the science and engineering practices as well as the cross-cutting concepts. Needed to be something that helped teachers figure out this balance, this synergy that they have to put into their classroom. We needed the engineering components there. We wanted to expose students to updated careers. We wanted them making real-world connections. We didn't want a traditional textbook to be read section by section, answering questions after. We wanted a textbook that put the phenomena first. There are also online aspects of the program as well. In terms of teaching, we were concerned about the timing of lessons, the organization of lessons being clear and easy to follow. Most of your elementary teachers have other subjects that they're preparing for as well, and we wanted to make certain that if their specialty was not science, which it is often not at the elementary level, that you had the amount of support as a teacher that would help you move forward and move your students forward with the standards. The program is comprehensive and minimizes teachers' need to gather outside material. Directions are user-friendly, and the teacher functions, based on the textbook, the teacher functions as a facilitator rather than the expert talking in the room. Student criteria, we made sure that there was sufficient differentiation for ESL students, special education students, as well as gifted students. We made sure that the phenomena of real-world connections would appeal to our diverse population. We wanted to make sure that the students were aware of the 3 dimensions and that lessons were student-centered. And we wanted to make sure they would like it, that when they opened the book, it would catch their attention. So those are the criteria we used. Initially, this is some data from when we began with the 4 programs. TCI FOSS, that is Cengage with National Geographic, they're together in the yellow, and Knowing Science. Knowing Science and FOSS were eliminated. They did not meet our criteria. TCI and National Geographic moved on to the pilot stage. 16 teachers who represented all schools and all grade levels, as well as special education, were selected to pilot both programs. Each program came here to train our teachers. Teachers responded to a Google form using the criteria that I just showed you and a Likert scale, both at the mid and end points of each trial. The full committee reconvened on May 18th to discuss the merits of each program and make a recommendation. At that meeting, pilot teachers shared their experiences and opinions of each program, and members analyzed both qualitative and quantitative data. So just as the standards dictated, I took on the process. We had both quantitative. I gathered lots of data for the teachers to ask each other about, to process, and to find patterns in. Members discussed the pros and cons of each program and the demands of the standards and the needs of the teachers and students. On that day, the Elementary Science Committee voted 21-3 to recommend National Geographic Learning and Cengage Learning's Exploring Science. They are two companies together. Again, it's National Geographic with the publishing house Cengage, and the program is Exploring Science. Some of the highlights for Exploring Science. The text provided a clear connection to the new standards and was helpful for teachers assimilating to the philosophical shift of NGSS. All lessons began with a natural phenomenon and made real-world connections. Lessons used a research-based 25-year-old Roger Bybee's renowned 5E method to help students gather facts. So Roger Bybee has actually put out his method approximately 25 years ago, and then as the development of the standards came in, they pulled him in as an author. And our program is based on his method called 5E. The E's are engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate, so that as students are becoming familiar with the topic, they're moving into a deeper understanding. Teachers also expressed that the timing of the lessons was manageable and that students who missed lessons and returned re-engaged with ease. Student might be absent, student might have a lesson or service that they're pulled from, and they're able to rejoin and succeed. In terms of the resources, there is an in-depth discussion of the standards throughout each page. In fact, every page, including the student's book, has the standard, the DCI, Disciplinary Core Idea, in every corner. As you can see up there, I won't read it to you. There is a literacy component as well. And what's great about this is students aren't reading a textbook. What they're reading are articles, phenomena, those applications. The other piece that we felt was great, these readers are all for the same grade. They look identical. Every page, every graphic is identical. Very discreetly on the back, they are for 3 different Lexile levels, so that the access that all students have in the room to the scientific ideas is equal. You don't have to be a great reader to have access to the scientific ideas. You're a part of everything. Every child at their level is met with our supplementary readers. There was a high interest level expressed by students. And there were integrations of career sections. These are highly updated careers, most of which are employees, scientists, and researchers from National Geographic. We also saw that the differentiation for ELLs and special ed students was very clear and outlined for teachers. There are also Spanish versions available for the grade levels. This reviews some of the information I just shared with you, but in terms of the content and literacy support, there is writing integrated. There is those reading texts integrated. There are some research opportunities as well. In terms of technology, students will have online licenses so that they can use an interactive book at home. That book has the ability to read to students. It also has some interactive quizzes that check for understanding, as well as some diagrams and models. There are rubrics provided for teachers in Think Like an Engineer and Think Like a Science Investigations. Those sections exist at every grade level, in every unit, and students have the opportunity to participate. So the recommendation for this program was brought to Curriculum Council. We now present to the board. This is a recommendation for our K-5 elementary science program. What we would like to do is be able to help teachers better understand the standards and provide some professional development before they leave for the summer. That is our goal. That's it. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Soriano. All right, what we're going to do is invite the board to come back up, and we're going to take questions from the board on this presentation, and then we'll turn it over to our Gifted and Talented Committee, and the board won't have to move. There is no PowerPoint, so you can stay up here for the G&T presentation. So won't the board members come back up?
A few questions. First of all, thank you so very much, Ms. Soriano, and to you and the entire committee. I'm glad to see that so many members of the different levels of different kindergartens through K-5 and ESL, as well as special education, were represented on the committee. I'm glad for a change the state gave us 3 years to implement something. Let's just begin with that. All right. One thing that I was wondering, going back several years, I remember the scientific method as having 7 steps. I notice now it's down to 5.
Yes, and those 5 are no longer emphasized, and the reason being that the more organic investigation where students are looking at something and asking questions doesn't always happen in that kind of rigid steps. The formulation of a hypothesis and then the experiment. So to accommodate what happens in real labs every day, the method as a 5-step is not taught that way. The practices are used and applied as needed.
I like that there's an engineering component in the Next Gen Science Standards. I also like that there's an emphasis on 21st century careers. I think about a week ago it was announced that there were 6 million jobs available, but unfortunately our workforce doesn't have the skills, the STEM or engineering skills to match those jobs. So I'm happy to see that engineering is a part of this.
Yes.
Let's see. I also like that the program is student-centered, and I like that you got input from both the teachers and the students as to how they learn. I like that there's both a visual and an audio component, because many students have various learning styles, and that's represented. Thank you for all your hard work. I don't have any questions. This was excellent.
I am very grateful. As you said, the committee really worked together. A lot of ideas on the table, a lot of different perspectives coming together. And I think it provided us, at least with the best recommendation that I could give you for our district.
Thank you for all your hard work. You're welcome. Mr. Schwarzbaum?
Seems very exciting.
Good
luck.
Thank you.
Quick question. Are any of the districts using the National Geographic curriculum?
So what we have is National Geographic adjusted as soon as the standards were official. National Geographic stopped production on what they were doing, shifted gears, picked up some of the authors to be part of the design of this program. So this program is 2015 with 2016 for some of the Spanish versions, so it's really new. The districts that have adopted so far are Wayne, Hapakon, Dumont, Merchant, Ramsey, Oradell, River Edge, Delran, Vineland, Washington Township, and Lakewood, Keensburg, and Jefferson Township. Many districts, if the timing wasn't right, had they bought something just before those standards came out, many of them are trying to just crosswalk what exists. So fortunately, we're in a position where we needed one and timed it in a way where we could make certain that the standards were fully met with our next purchase.
And can you discuss the timing for the training of the professional development to the teachers?
Sure. For the pilot teachers or the teachers
for the actual implementation.
What we would like to do is a 2 to 2.5 hour orientation into the new standards, what a classroom should look like within the next week.
Great, thank you.
First of all, amazing job. This shift was much needed. The focus more on conceptual, on methodology, on practices, and then from an engineering standpoint to problem solution. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And then, of course, within that is kind of built-in opportunities for innovation. As I'm looking at this, couple questions. Sure. Granted, you're going to be doing teacher training. Granted, professional development. Within each building, though, I imagine that I know for Mount Pleasant, for instance, we had the terrific Mrs. Galati. Mm-hmm. Within each building, there are science teachers. Are you going to have any sort of point person within is there going to be any co-teaching or co-development of anything, given that you have some people who are who specialize in science and other teachers who are generalists?
Correct.
Who won't be focused on this?
Ideally, what we have started to develop this year is those members of the science committee who are a little bit more advanced in their understanding, would function as support within each school for the teachers. The program itself does, I think, an excellent job of explaining to teachers not just philosophically why this change needs to take place or why it needs to be taught that way, but it actually outlines, this is how you start this unit off. This is how you start a lesson off. So there should be a uniform approach across the district. We'll also use technology, Google Hangout, and I will begin Google Classrooms for the teachers.
Awesome.
So that they will be in touch with me and we can make adjustments, if need be.
Okay. Will there be opportunities for the kids to work on collaborative projects, both through virtually through a Google Classroom or Google Hangouts, as well as in their individual classrooms?
Yes, with everybody moving, at the same pace through the program, there would be that opportunity available. And again, the technology makes it real.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've heard, and this is, you're just piloting this now, but one of the things I've heard some feedback on is that sometimes the elementary school teachers don't entirely know what's going on in the middle school level and how the curriculum are to sync up. That the articulation going from elementary to middle school. And I looked at the committee, and certainly you're the linchpin that brings it all together. But you're also the linchpin for 12 grades in kindergarten. So how are you addressing articulation going from elementary to middle school to make sure that those curricula are really synced up and there's proper preparation for the kids going into middle school, and especially for those who may be going into middle school honors? Are they going to have what they need to qualify and
succeed?
So
we would like to start some vertical articulation opportunities, particularly between elementary and middle school. And we would also like to have the lower grades exposed to what the upper grades are doing and the expectation of the upper grades. The standards are written in a way, so let's say you're talking about the behavior of light. They would study the behavior of light from kindergarten straight through 12th grade, and they're very specifically written as to where a kindergartner, what their upper boundary is, and then where first grade picks up. So there is some natural vertical articulation that the standards demand that we'll see that maybe we haven't seen as distinctly with our current program.
Okay. And the integration of mathematical models, and I imagine that certainly there's going to be how do you address data, how do you analyze data and approaches to that. Will there also be simple concepts for, say, physics woven in, like whether it's not necessarily force equals mass times acceleration, but speed as distance per unit time, or things like that woven into it?
So overall, what I have found with the standards is that there is not an emphasis on, let's say, looking at a physics formula and finding the answer and using it to seek an answer, but using it to explain how one variable would affect another variable, how altering one piece would affect the whole And those concepts begin at the elementary level. They may not have the formula ready yet, but they start to begin to look at, let's say, mass and force.
Cool. Very cool. Just a couple more questions. As I looked at the technology integration component, it's excellent. And I think this entire program is really breakthrough, dynamic, and thank you for delivering this. And I know it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting when you first, when you first pilot it, but it's beautiful.
It will be an adjustment, but I think it does the standards justice, and I think the students will really be engaged and enjoy what they're learning.
And getting to that engagement, I was wondering a couple things. We saw earlier this year some of the projects done by Washington and Hazel and by Kelly in terms of being able to work with little robotics and program, whether it's SNAP. I don't know if SNAP was used for that, but will there be that opportunity for kids to have these kind of tangible, experiential things where they can build or program and be able to kind of see?
Yes, that points to the larger strategic plan where we carry down some of Mr. Del Gercio's work in engineering and technology into our science classes.
Okay. And as I looked at the integration of technology again, you have a lot of great tools in there, but there were some things that I remember that were, I believe it was it Gregory's STEM Club or was it Redwood? I forget now. That were also utilized that could potentially, that were utilized for presentation purposes, and whether it's the Prezi online presentation or software that allowed a student to create their own avatar as part of the presentation, which is also great for it's both self-expression and as well as presentation. And there are even opportunities for things like there are some inexpensive website templates where kids could potentially, do things like that instead of doing a poster board or a movie poster, things like that.
Absolutely.
Will there be those types of opportunities?
Yes. When we look at how students communicate scientific ideas, that's one of our science and engineering practices. And the reality is, the simple poster, is an interesting two-dimensional infographic, but there are so many more opportunities for our students to present their thoughts on scientific information, and we will utilize those.
Excellent. Last, I know Scratch programming has curricula that's available pretty much, K onward. Actually, even pre-K now. That MIT went back and reworked it. And I know that I know my daughter, when she went to one of the after-school enrichments, they were doing some work with Scratch and to animate, to create and animate various characters. Will we be integrating code? I know code is going to definitely be at the 6th grade level, but are we integrating code as part of this program earlier on, K-5?
There will be opportunities, but again, that would be not purely from this program, but more of a partnership between our two departments. One of the areas I can see that very easily fitting into is the science and engineering practice of developing models. Those models could well be a 3D model on a 3D printer.
Okay. And last, this is more of a just kind of a heads up than anything. As we look at all that so much of this is going to involve, whether it's whether you're in Google Classroom or you're in using Google Hangout, which is a great tool, or as well as some of the other programs we're utilizing. Kids are going to be using Chromebooks and working a lot more in that manner. And I noticed this past year, in some cases, as we had the fantastic change with departmentalization 3 through 5, there were some things that fell through the cracks that may impact some of what we're doing, like keyboarding. A lot of 5th graders were not getting the level of keyboarding that they needed or at all, and some of it fell off in 4th grade. Okay. So I know that's going to be part of more of an interdepartmental type of thing, but it could definitely impact as you're going to be having a lot more work done on the Chromebooks. It can have an impact there. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
I will have that in mind.
Thank you for really a terrific leadership on this. And I know it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great. Thank you.
Mr. Charles?
I just have 2 quick questions.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit how the committee members were selected?
Sure. We asked the principals to select teachers who were particularly interested in the program. We took a look at how those initial names were distributed across grade levels, and then we made certain to contact those principals again and say, you know what, we need a first grade teacher. We only have one with a different perspective, so we made certain. We also, because of departmentalization, the 4th and 5th grade teachers, they live with this program in a way that, you know, a 2nd grade teacher uses it. And so we made certain that there were a 4th and 5th grade teacher who were science teachers from each school. So we played a little bit heavier to our departmentalized teachers.
Okay. And you said Cengage is the publisher, right?
Cengage is the publishing house. It's a partnership between National Geographic and Cengage.
Okay. And just lastly, I just want to thank the committee for all the hard work.
Yes,
It's pretty thorough work. That's all I have, Madam President.
Mrs. Lab? Just 2 quick questions.
Sure.
You had indicated that 3 of the 21 committee members did not support these 2 programs that you ultimately choose. Do you remember what their reservations were?
One of them, for the most part, those were teachers who liked the online aspect and preferred the technology of the other company. They were so high-tech that they did not have teachers' additions. So whereas they took a liking to that, that made it more difficult for most of the other teachers to work with and to understand. So there was I think the technology is something that those teachers preferred over the technology of National Geographic.
Okay. And just a comment, I was pleased when you showed the 3 books that although inside they're a little bit different, outside everyone's the same, so no one knows what the differentiated instruction is presented to the students.
Yes.
And that's kind of key. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if you don't mind just staying until we're done with the gifted and talented, and then we'll have the opportunity for the public to ask comments to you and to the G&T committee.
I'm happy to.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our last presentation. It is the Gifted and Talented program. I just want to recognize the committee members first, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mendez, who was leading the charge on the Gifted program. Mr. Curio is the principal of Redwood. Darlene Berg is the supervisor of mathematics for grades K through 5. Julie DiGiacomo is the principal at Mount Pleasant. Denise DeMartinez is the supervisor of English Language Arts K-5. Xavier Fitzgerald is principal at Edison. Rebecca Giacopelli is one of the gifted program teachers now. The other is Lauren Halen. They were both on the committee. Pooja Goel is a parent from Redwood and Liberty. Maureen Hurd-Haas is also a parent, St. Cloud and Edison. Janira Joseph is a parent from Hazel. Dr. Polera, principal at Kelly Elementary. Mr. Price, our principal at St. Cloud. Brent Scott is a parent from Redwood. And David Sullivan is a parent from Kelly. They did tremendous work, met quite often, and had a lot of work to do. And I was able to jump into a couple of meetings, listen to what was happening, the direction it was going, and was very pleased. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Mendez and those individuals that are here. I know Ms. Giacopelli is here, Ms. Hurd-Haas is here tonight, Dr. Polero, Mr. Price, and Mr. Arcaro is in the audience as well. Ms. Thompson is here. I'm doing a dual meet tonight, listening to it and starting us off with her students. So if I can just ask Mr. Mendez come up and go ahead and begin the presentation, please.
Good evening. Wow. Good evening. Tonight, the Gifted Committee is going to report out to the board on its progress to date. We are in alignment with the strategic plan goal 2, readiness for future success. Our charge this year was to increase student achievement to ensure that all students are challenged and engaged. And our objective was to evaluate and redesign a K-12 gifted and talented program that offers a variety of pathways aligned to our gifted learners' specific abilities. So that was our strategic plan goal. objective to take a good look at the gifted and talented program and to make recommendations to the board moving forward. So tonight will be our report, what we've done so far. You have a draft of a program guide. That guide is still in feedback, in a place of feedback. We have shared that guide with some of our parents at a meeting last week, sharing it with you today for feedback, and sharing it again on the 14th for the last revision so that we can publish it on our district website. We will do that tomorrow. We'll put up the guide so that all parents can see it in writing and give their last pieces of feedback. We'll make the final changes so the board has a final draft for the next board meeting where we're going to ask for the approval of the program. So where did we begin? I think we really began with defining what is gifted. We began by defining a philosophy for the gifted program. You'll see that philosophy on page 3 of your guide. The philosophy really wrapped itself around making sure we would meet the needs of the gifted learners, making sure we would meet the needs of all gifted learners, and really consider the difference in backgrounds, the difference in culture, the difference in access to learning, and making sure that those things didn't play a part in our gifted program. We defined giftedness, and then we began to look at different screening and identification. We currently only have one way to measure students who enter into the program. It's one test. It's the InView. It's an aptitude test. And the first piece of feedback that we received from the community and board members alike was that we needed to have multiple criteria. We needed to have criteria that would be inclusive of greater representation of our students, not just 1%, but we expanded that to the 6 to 10%. That was very important to the committee. And so with that said, we're going to have Ms. Herdhouse come and talk to us about what those screening and criteria are.
Thank you for the opportunity to serve on this interesting committee. A central focus of the meetings of the committee involved identifying and selecting multiple entry assessments and criteria to replace the single test of the past. The committee worked to implement measures that will recognize giftedness in children with a variety of abilities and from diverse cultural, socioeconomic, and other backgrounds. The committee followed the research-based Renzulli model, which defines giftedness as having 3 components: above average ability, creativity, and task commitment. The committee recommends examining these components in children by assessing their aptitude, which includes abilities in nonverbal reasoning, problem solving, and creativity, their competence, which includes their academic progress, and their task commitment, which includes motivation turned into action by way of perseverance, endurance, hard work, a special fascination with the subject, and so forth. Aptitude, nonverbal reasoning, problem solving, and creativity will be assessed in grades K and 1 with observation by the gifted and talented faculty and by classroom teachers, as these children are too young for accurate formal testing. In grade 2, aptitude will continue to be assessed by the InView test. And in grades 3 to 5, aptitude will be assessed by the Naglieri Nonverbal Abilities Test, which is especially valuable because it has the least bias. Competence will be assessed with the MAP, which stands for Measure of Academic Progress Assessment for grades K to 5. This test is particularly valuable because it is a computerized test that advances to higher grade levels as students successfully answer questions, and it measures a student's growth against him or herself rather than measuring one student against another. Competence will also be assessed in grades 3 to 5 with the PARCC assessments in English, Language Arts, and Mathematics. And if a student meets the entrance criteria for aptitude and competence, they will be evaluated in the area of task commitment, and those assessments will include classroom teachers completing a teacher inventory and student portfolio, which will include the most recent student grades, an ELA writing sample, a math writing sample, a project sample, and students' reflections of their products and performances. And there would be additional qualitative measures resulting in teacher nominations that will include student interviews and classroom observations.
Throughout that criteria, we heard about K1. Thank you. We heard about the K1 observation. The committee really talked about the young student, the young learner, and how much testing we did or didn't want to impose on our students. In second grade, you also heard Ms. Herdhouse talk about continuing with the InView. We have that as a temporary continuation with the InView because the Naglieri, which is the test we really wanted to use, has been embargoed by the state of New York. So have the other two assessments that exist for gifted, which means we and the state of Connecticut are not allowed to use them. So they've kind of monopolized that market. What we're going to do is take this next year to continue to assess what we can do for our second graders in terms of assessment, but that's why you heard the InView there as a continuation for grade 2. We are allowed, however, to use the NNAT for grades 3 through 5. You also heard the MAP as a potential use for the competence, and that's pending board approval. It is on the agenda tonight, and should the board approve that, then that would be our assessment. You will begin to hear an alignment of all of the assessments as they come forward, so they will overlap in presentation. So that was the screening and identification. In the next component of the guideline, you will see the program components. How will we address gifted K-12? That was a big question. Are we in compliance? We only have it for grades 3 and up. At the high school and at the middle school, it's honors and AP, right? At the lower levels, we didn't have it. This committee for this year was able to accomplish a year 1 goal, which was K-5. Our 6-7 program will remain the same for 1 more year. Next year in September, we will assemble a committee to continue the work for 6-8, and then we will report back to the board on that committee's work. So when we think about the program components, Mr. Eric Price, our principal of St. Cloud, is going to talk to us about those components for our district.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. JROTC. I'd just like to begin by saying it was a real honor to serve on the committee. It was a great group of people, very thoughtful, very thorough, and very considerate of inclusivity and making sure that we did have multiple measures and that our program was comprehensive, K through 12. To accomplish its philosophy, the West Orange Schools Gifted Program will provide a continuum of services for the exceptional learner. Designed to address specific needs and level of giftedness from kindergarten through grade 12, gifted programming options are provided throughout the day in the regular school day. So beginning in kindergarten and grade 1, using multiple measures, students identified as gifted learners will receive enrichment programming in the general education classroom with a gifted program teacher offering extensions to the classroom curriculum. Extensions will include adjustments to the curriculum for students who have already mastered grade-level material that enhance critical and creative thinking, logical reasoning, and problem-solving strategies through project-based learning. In grade 2, this is where we're actually moving the program down from the 3 to 5. In grade 2, students in grade 2 will receive enrichment programming in the general education classroom with a gifted program teacher for 8 weeks through December. Enrichment programming will include critical and creative thinking, logical reasoning, and problem-solving strategies throughout project-based learning. Students identified as gifted learners will meet once a week for a half day of accelerated instruction with peers of like ability beginning in January. So again, very much the same program we now have for the 3 through 5. We will move down to the second grade beginning in January, the second half of grade 2. For grade 3 through 5, students identified as gifted learners in the elementary grades will meet once a week for a half day of accelerated instruction with peers of like abilities. Learners will have the opportunity to experience a myriad of non-graded learning environments, both traditional and virtual. And this is an aspect that we are adding this year, and it's an important component in which we want to be able to utilize, professional organizations, institutions of higher learning, in which we can extend the classroom, look for opportunities to use our technologies to bring our kids to places of expertise, scientists, doctors, engineers, to begin to have really authentic experiences with real-world problems and interest levels that are high and complex. Again, the curricular for 3 through 5 will incorporate advanced, conceptually challenging, in-depth, distinctive, and complex content for our students. For grade 6 through 8, students identified as advanced learners in the middle grades will receive academic instruction at the honors level in all 4 major content areas: English language arts, math, science, and social studies. The honors program provides an acceleration of curriculum and instructional pacing to those who have already mastered grade level content, as well as the opportunity to enroll in advanced courses earlier in their middle school career. In honors courses, the level and complexity of the curriculum is matched with readiness and motivation of the advanced learner. For grades 9 through 12, at the high school level, students identified as advanced learners in the secondary grades will receive academic instruction at the honors and/or advanced placement level in all major content areas and in specialized courses as identified in the West Orange High School program of study. Advanced coursework affords students the opportunity to master accelerated curriculum as well as earn college credits through dual enrollment. Importantly, however, for those students who aren't identified and gifted and talented, as we know, West Orange offers an incredibly rigorous curriculum for all of our students. Effective differentiated instruction will be available in the general education classroom to ensure that all students meet their highest potential. Differentiation will consist of carefully planned, coordinated learning experience in language arts, math, social studies, and science that extend the core curriculum, combine the curricular strategies of enrichment, and integrate instructional strategies that engage learners at appropriate levels of challenge. In addition, in ELA, diagnostic assessments are used to determine student readiness for reading. Content area instruction is supported with carefully leveled text that cover essential content at just the right reading level for each student, as we saw in our new science program that we're being adopted that we're really excited for K through 5. That guided reading program ensures success in reading, writing, and comprehension and helps move students toward independent reading for all. So that is our program. That was the charge given to us. We've done a great job, and we're very excited that we will be able to provide, again, that continuum of services K through 12. Thank you.
Some of the feedback that our parents gave us initial at our last meeting was for the K-1, how will the students be serviced in their classes? They will be pulled out in small group. A large piece of feedback was to make sure that they would have the opportunity to be pulled out with like peers. For example, if there was just one gifted student in a class, that they wouldn't be serviced alone. So we will take that into consideration. In grade 2, you heard a transition first half of the year. In their classroom, second half of the year, since they're young, then we'll bring them into gifted program proper. And for 6 through 12, you
Check, 1, 2.
staying the same for next year. However, the primary concern, the primary feedback of our 6-8 parents is for the district to define the difference between gifted and honors. All right, so that's going to be our work next year. What is gifted? What is honors? What's the difference? And how do we meet the different needs of those two students? Because there is a different need, right? We have 2 more areas to go. The school-home connection, one of our parents was unable to attend this evening, so Mr. Arcurio is going to talk about the school-home connection. This was a huge piece of feedback, again, from parents, making sure that everyone knows about the gifted program.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. It was a pleasure to serve on this committee. There were a lot of wonderful conversations that we were able to have, and one of the things that came up very early in the process was that parents really want to know what this program is about and want to know what their children are doing throughout. So one of the things that we built into this program is that we're going to have a forum every September. The gifted program should be something that's organic, should be something where we're able to take feedback and we're able to adjust as needed as we move forward. So in this forum in September, which is for parents, teachers, students, and committee members, it'll be an opportunity for people to learn about the program, to preview the expectations that we're going to have of the children. There'll be an overview of the units of study and any virtual classroom opportunities that we'd be providing the children. People will have an opportunity to ask and answer and get questions answered. And we'll also be able to get the feedback that we need so that we can keep this gifted program something that's relevant as we move forward. Additionally, as a parent who has a child in the program, parents want to know what's going on. So we also have a variety of ways that those parents can remain informed. There is the opportunity to visit the classroom and have a demonstration lesson. So if a parent is interested in seeing what's going on in the gifted classrooms, they would just have to talk to the principal, or if it's over at the board office, speak to the teachers and arrange a time where they could come and observe what's going on in the classroom. We also have parent-teacher conferences that are held once a year. Those teachers will be able to sit with parents and discuss what their children are doing and how their children are doing. There's, of course, the opportunity to make phone calls to the 2 teachers who teach the program. Also, there will be periodic notices that are sent home that highlight the program activities and the special events that the children are doing. And finally, we may be bringing in parents and community members who have an expertise in particular areas so that they can work with our children, and that would be another opportunity, particularly if it's a parent of a child in the program, where those parents would be able to see and feel firsthand what goes on in our program. So that is our homeschool connection.
And lastly, a large piece of feedback we received was in reference to the curriculum. What are the students learning? Do we have a formal curriculum? Is something written? And what is that social and emotional component? How will we meet the needs, the social and emotional needs of our gifted learners? So one of our current gifted program teachers, Rebecca Jacopelli, will talk about the curriculum and the social and emotional component.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to also say thank you for having me be a part of this committee. This is my 13th year in district teaching this program, and I was very excited to see it having a chance to be revamped. So one of the charges was coming up with curriculum. Miss Laura Halen, Mrs. Diana DaCosta, who is a representative of the technology department, and myself are now given the charge to work on the curriculum for the new gifted program. And we want to make sure that it's updated and implemented for January of 2018. We are going to accomplish this goal through research-based curriculum in which gifted students are provided with advanced academic experiences that are challenging, that are hands-on, that are relevant to real-world problems, that encourage students to develop projects that are innovative. It is, the curriculum will be strengthening the development of higher level thinking processes, research, problem solving and communication skills that utilize technology, and the creativity in the English language arts, math, and STEM fields. We believe that it's our commitment to address the educational needs of the students and to identify these gifted learners, and we hope that the philosophy that we've taken on the gifted education recognizes that these students have unique and exceptional abilities that we want to make sure we nurture to ensure that they reach their full potential. Part of what was discussed was the technology component. That is very important to us. We're looking into, which has already been stated, but using the Google apps. We're looking into having virtual field trips, possibly having experts reached. In my classroom this year alone, we've reached out to the Museum of Natural History. We've heard back from many engineers and even parents who are architects, which has been great. Into the social and emotional needs, we felt that this is a component that has been somewhat ignored in the past, and the social and emotional challenges that gifted learners encounter should be addressed by our committee. One of the areas we've added to our team of principals and teachers who are assessing these children are also the guidance counselors. We feel that they may have a valuable input onto whether or not a student may have some emotional issues that come with the tag of being gifted. We're going to make sure their needs are met. We're going to support and help maximize their potential. We're going to make sure that the classroom teachers are provided with professional development in order to help them better understand the needs of gifted students within their classroom. We're also going to make sure that there's collaboration with their likability peers so they can have a healthy self-concept, and counseling services will be provided, and they will help the gifted learners learn to understand situations from another's perspective, how to diffuse anger, how to make their needs known in a productive manner, and also promote positive relationships, which are some of the research that shows gifted students have difficulty with. So we're looking forward to moving forward, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think that really captures the body of the work. This committee has been so thoughtful and so thorough. I just want to thank all of the members of the committee for really going through this process. In the draft, you'll see that we have all of these sections, plus a section on exit criteria, appeals, the fact that we're going to evaluate the program annually. So what are our next steps? This program is going to be, if approved by the board, it would be for implementation in January. This will give us time to, one, get our assessments in order, assess the students, transition into a new program, write the curriculum over the summer and into the next year. So we have a few steps to go. This is our progress to date. We will be, again, publishing this draft online tomorrow, continuing to get feedback from parents. We have another meeting on the 14th. We'll finalize that draft and then come back to the board for approval if the board deems so at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez.
All right, so what I recommend is let the board go ahead and have comments to the committee about the G&T, and then we open it up to the public to have comments on either the science or the G&T, and then that group can go when the public comments are done, so they're not here all night long. All right?
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. JROTC. Thank you, first of all, to the entire committee. I'm happy to see that parents were able to participate. I'm really excited to see this update. I've been on the board for a few years, and we've tried to do this quite a few times, and it didn't always work the way we wanted it to. I do have a couple of questions about the program components. For kindergarten through grade 1, it says that there will be enrichment programming. It doesn't say for how long. So for how many weeks will the enrichment program be? Is it throughout the duration of the year, kindergarten through grade 1? That's not expressed here.
Throughout the duration of the year.
Okay, so that's year long. And A similar question as well for grade 2. It says it begins in January. Does it go January to June?
From September through December, 8 weeks will be gifted learning as a part of their classroom. The gifted teachers will push into the classroom, maybe pull small groups for a transition. And then beginning in January, they would come to the gifted program here at central office.
And that's January to June?
And that's January to June. And
Oh.
then by grade 3, it will be a full program.
Okay, for the whole year. Okay. Okay, my other thing is, I like that there's a social and emotional section to this, because I don't think we've addressed the social and emotional needs of gifted learners before, and that's always been an issue. So I'm happy to see that that is being addressed this time around. Now, Principal Okura mentioned that there's going to be an annual forum. Could that be twice a year instead? Because it's great to have it in September, but there should be some checkpoint beyond September, say September and then maybe January, or September and February.
Absolutely.
So that you can get regular feedback from the community.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Mr. Schwarzbaum?
First of all, I want to congratulate you and wish you a lot of success. In the discussions over the time that I've been on the board, there are 3 classifications. I'll use them very broad: gifted and talented, honors, and regular ed. Can you, in grades, after first grade, where you're using MAP and PARC, have you set the benchmarks for what will be determined for gifted and talented, honors, and regular?
In this proposal that you have, we've set the benchmarks for gifted. In an honors criteria, you should see the benchmarks for honors. They would each be in their respective areas. So in this proposal, you only see the benchmarks for gifted. When we think about aptitude, which would be either the current InView or the Naglieri, they give us the benchmark, the percentage, which is the 95th percentile generally of students who demonstrate giftedness. And therefore, we are being led by the experts and that data. For the MAP, the same. MAP has the 95th percentile identified for students demonstrating giftedness. And for the PARC, in the exceeding area, we've leveraged that area and gone into the 95th percentile for gifted. So we're aligning all of our data, all of our criteria, to get a whole picture of the student. And then we've added task commitment with Renzulli's data, his research, to say it's not just the test grades, it's not just the scores, but what does the student produce? What is their commitment to learning, to thinking critically, and how is that observed? And in the guide, you'll see that we've added teacher inventories and parent inventories that also add to that data, so parents can have input and say, this is what we're seeing at home, and teachers can identify what they're seeing in the classrooms. That was another piece of feedback, that we need to provide our general education teachers with professional development so that they can identify what giftedness looks like versus what honors looks like, right? One of our parents at the forum the other day really explained it well. An honors program might be acceleration. They're learning at a quicker pace, right? But a gifted program would be the way that the student is thinking. It's different, and so then we want to make the distinction between the two.
So what role will grades play in the gifted and talented?
Here you do not see roles play a grade in the criteria. Grades play a role in the criteria. Here what we're offering is we're suggesting if a student has been identified with the 3 areas, aptitude, competence, and task commitment, and they've been accepted into the gifted program, then they must maintain their grades in order to stay into the program, because we do not want to pull a student out for gifted programming and then they're struggling in their current classroom. So as long as they're excelling, I don't want to even say maintain, but as long as they're showing that advanced and those characteristics of giftedness in their gifted setting with their like peers and in their general education setting, then they would stay.
So in the following hypothetical situation where you have a student who is testing in the 97th percentile but is getting 80s in their 80s just because they're just smart Alex, what happens? Do you let them in, the gifted and talented?
I think that would come, it would show up in the task commitment, because that's where you see product, that's where you see portfolio, that's where you see student work, that's where you see student writing, and that would be a discussion with a gifted committee. That's also a new feature of the proposal, that it's not one person deciding. Now it's a committee. It's the principal, it's the gifted teacher, it's the general education teacher, it's a school counselor. So now you have a committee looking at all of these pieces and having a conversation about the child. So then again, we're not just on a number, on a test, but it's the whole child, and that giftedness might demonstrate in different ways. And then I think another piece that was a huge conversation was sometimes students are coming to us and they might not have had access to early education or a print-rich environment, etc. And we want to distill the difference between a child who may not have had access to early education versus giftedness, which is a difference, right? So there might be a child who has not had a print-rich environment and all of the preschool, etc., but they're gifted, but we have to find it, we have to see it, we have to draw it out.
So one question is in regard to pulling out gifted and talented children to central office where they're in their own class, and sometimes some of the issues are the whole socialization aspect is that they tend to be I'll use a term that I'll accept getting smacked for, nerds or things like that, where they tend not to be with the regular kids, and therefore they tend to just socialize with similar type kids, and then we're back to the same issue where they're really not integrating on a social basis with their classmates. And how are you going to address that?
That was a struggle for the committee. That was a struggle. We went back and forth with, do we bring them up here? Do we leave them in their environment? I think it was also a conversation of disparate ends with parents. Some parents said, I want them in their classroom. I don't want them to miss the activities, the other things that are happening in their home school. And other parents said, yes, but we want them with like peers. That's the whole point of giftedness. And so then at this point, we're leaving the model with them coming here to be with their like peers. It is a prong for our definition of giftedness and our way to address their learning, to bring them with their peers. However, we do have an integration of the virtual experience, which means that we will not always bring them to the building every single, right? We will leave them in their building. They may go to the media lab. They will probably, go to a surgery room or out of space, right, virtually, and then they can experience that in their building. So we're going to look at a hybrid and really try to meet the different needs.
Okay, good. Good luck.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, wow. This is the most comprehensive, in-depth, well-thought-out, and an amazing team effort. Mrs. DeMendez and the committee really, you took this to a quantum leap above where gifted and talented has been, and I just really want to applaud your efforts. You've taken it to a whole new place. Also, and I also like that the parameters have been expanded a bit. It's not top 3%, it's top 5%, and you're looking, obviously, at more parameters. Couple of things. Particularly as you're looking at how to integrate the gifted child, integrate the gifted portion of their curricula with the honors portion or their general ed classrooms. Are we going to be cross-training teachers at all as to how to better address the needs of a gifted child? I'll give you an example. I like the fact that you pulled that classroom grades are going to be part of the overall evaluation construct. But I'm aware of gifted kids, and I used to be a lot smarter. I was actually one of those kids myself once. I'm aware of gifted kids who grasp things conceptually and may not need to do the homework. And so one kid in particular got straight A's on all of his math tests, actually surpassed all of our math department's curricula, but was getting poor grades in his class because the teacher didn't quite understand him, and he didn't understand he didn't need to do homework, and he was already thinking so far above what he was being given, nobody really addressed that. So first question is, will there be any sort of cross-training as part of the professional development with the classroom teacher who's not specific to G&T?
Yes. We are going to begin the professional development next year. We are currently developing the curriculum. Once the curriculum is developed, then we will be able to identify the priorities for that professional development. And then just a point for the assessment. Again, pending board approval with the MAP tonight. The MAP will be a unique feature because it is adaptive. And so then for maybe the first time, I don't know, but a student who generally is gifted, they sit down with the regular tests that we create and they ace them. They get the hundreds, they get the hundreds, they get the hundreds. The MAP will allow the student, first question, to start at grade level, but then it will go until we tap out, right, until we reach the student's instructional level. So now we're going to have a conversation with those students who are used to getting 100 or a perfect score, and we're going to have to explain, when you sit down to take this assessment, it's going to take you until you can't go any further, right, until you start to miss some of these questions. Why? Because that's going to produce a report of the student's instructional level and where the teacher then can begin to address the student's needs in the classroom coupled with that professional development, because this is where the student is ready to work. And then when we're pulling that student for gifted programming, we'll be able to equally use that continuum or that scope of learning to address that student's needs. Again, beyond a static curriculum and one that's really tailored for where am I as a student and where is my instructional level.
Well, that leads me to my next question. MAP is an adaptive, customizable assessment tool. It's a tool. It's not the assessment test itself. For whether we adapt it for honors, whatever we adapt it for. Who will be the guardian of ensuring that MAP and its various usage are in fact tied back to the specific curricula guides, and that the assessment from a pedagogical standpoint actually aligns with curricula? Okay.
I think, one, we're all going to be the guardians, right? Teachers, they're in the classroom, they're going to see the supervisors of content who are with their teams writing curriculum, and of course myself as the instructional leader of curriculum. I think we're all going to monitor that. This year will be a year one with gifted, it will be a year one with MAP, it will be a year one with all of the different systemic pieces we're putting together. We will evaluate them and then come back with feedback and see how we did and then tweak.
Okay, excellent. If I understand this correctly, and the first stage of evaluating before entering into the teacher feedback and all that is to look at aptitude and competence, correct? And that's the first litmus test, as it were, before you then enact these other evaluative tools or evaluative approaches?
I would say aptitude, competence, and the task commitment.
And the task commitment, okay,
Yes.
because what I heard earlier was okay. And task commitment, that's important. It also says something about a level of kind of intellectual maturity. Also, just philosophically, I had a question. I noticed that throughout, this is referred to as a gifted program, not a gifted and talented. Now, I don't want to get into a whole lot of semantics, but there has been a lot of debate about gifted versus talented. Some may say a gifted child may intuitively understand something, while a talented they both have a higher level of aptitude and competence in a particular area, but the talented child may require more process, a little bit more work, but it's still performing at a much higher level than the average student. Right. Is there any differentiation in this between gifted and talented, and why did you choose to focus on calling this gifted?
Yes, very good point. Another robust conversation for the gifted committee. Well, one, right now, as the program is, it's academic. It addresses ELA and math. This year, or moving forward, January, pending your approval, we will add the STEM component, but it is still an academic program in nature. Given our budget year, given that we're in year one with program development, we took on the gifted end of the program, and next year we will look at the talented end, and we will come back with recommendations, whether they be for the arts or for sports or for the other arms of gifted and talented. We just were not prepared to do that budgetarily this year, but it was discussed, and
Understood.
we do have it as a talking point.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. I see in there the use of PARC as part of the array of assessment tools, and that disturbs me greatly. While the idea of using a state standardized test format is a great concept, we know that only 9 states still participate in PARC, and PARC, by many estimations from teachers, supervisors, folks outside of our district, is still a very flawed exam. Are we committed to using PARC as part of the assessment?
We've discussed that at length. We discussed PARC. We discussed how many years we're into PARC. We discussed how PARC is beginning to kind of norm itself. What we have seen, however, is a correlation between PARC scores and aptitude scores. So clearly, PARC has its issues, and I think we would all agree with that. However, we have not seen great discrepancy between PARC scores and, let's say, an InView score and or other aptitude assessments. We will monitor that, however, but we did not, and we did carefully review the data of all of the students for the past 3 years to see if there were discrepancies, and we did not find them. So, again, we will monitor it. If we see gaps, then we'll readjust.
Okay. And understanding that this is a G&T presentation and not an honors presentation, but, mention of honors always conjures up all sorts of wonderful things. And understanding that you're not responsible for looking at what are the criteria for honors. How do you, I'm not sure I understood how you envision, let me back up. The best practice in many districts, both in New Jersey and even looking at places like Howard County, Maryland, is to have honors and then G&T honors, where you have an enrichment or gifted and talented element that is layered upon the honors curricula, because there are elements of the honors curricula that will benefit all children, because they're still learning things that are fundamental to their development, even for a gifted child, that child may still need to develop in. How do you, and understanding it's still being worked out, how do you envision that potentially working together? Is it going to be an enrichment component within honors, or do you see at some point separating out a G&T honors?
I think it's the priority charge of the committee's work for next year. And so in September, when we assemble the committee, we have committee members, staff members, and parents who really want to define that with us. So in partnership with our parents, I think, and the research, then we'll begin to define that, and I'll be able to return with that report at that time.
And given how much, really incredible thought you and the team put into this, I have another question. For the kids in 6th through 8th grades, I understand that last year, and I apologize that I wasn't aware of it at the time, and then again this year, a letter was sent out to those parents to make a choice between honors and HAP. And I'm glad we're getting away from the name HAP. We're kind of rebranding and rethinking. But that's something that we never really discussed or approved as a board. But for parents, that presents a dilemma. Well, gee, how do I choose? My child for HAP English enjoys this particular element, but for honors, we know that it's going to have other elements in there. And we're hearing from, I'm not going to mention names, but this administrator over here is saying, go with honors because that's really the better way. If they miss those skills, it's going to screw them over for the next grade. How are we addressing, and granted it's in part 2, phase 2, and your phased approach makes a lot of sense. Okay, I totally support it. But what are we doing for those parents here today to address that issue And I hope at some point we bring this back to the board to actually have a discussion about it as well, because that was never something that was approved.
That has been the feedback. We're aware of that feedback. We're also aware that committee work for next year doesn't have to extend throughout the entire year before we make parts of a decision. That will be our first work in September. So in September, we're going to come really to terms with that issue right there in 6th grade, what's happening, and then hope to make an informed but a speedy decision at the beginning of the year so that we can begin implementing at the beginning of next year just that component. And then we'll continue with the committee work throughout the rest of the year. I understand we can't put everything on hold while we process through committee. So we know that that's a priority, and we plan to address that first and quickly.
Excellent. I really love, in addition to the social and emotional component, the community connection component. A couple questions on that. One, are you considering at all, when you look at different models for gifted and talented, including even at the high school level and the college level, one of the tools or communication tools that's been put into place, say like with Gates Millennium, the Gates Millennium program, is that they've created a virtual community. So the kids, parents, counselors, and all that actually connect, whether it's through Google Hangout or Skype or however you want to do it, actually connect virtually, and there's a virtual site where they can share some things on their experiences. Is there any thought that was given to something like that?
I think that's exactly what we are thinking about when we're adding that virtual component. If you'll notice in our curriculum committee writers, the selection, we included a technology expert so that that person can research all of those opportunities and introduce them to the curriculum.
Okay. Also looking at the community component, while the committee and the community, there's going to be a kind of an annual review, I would recommend that built into that process. By statute, every time there's a change in a program, it's got to actually supposed to come back to the board for discussion in open public meeting and roll call vote. So I would suggest that you kind of make sure that's built into that process as well, and it kind of will help in syncing up our various roles.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And a couple more things. Not to, I don't want to make folks uncomfortable, but I got to bring into diversity element. Over the years, some board members and myself, excuse me please, have been familiar with different challenges that have happened from a diversity standpoint. There are 3 kids right now who supposedly tested well but weren't in our app program, who are now they ended up in the other G&T program, and they're now getting a full ride to very prestigious boarding schools. We have I've heard other cases where parents reported to me things that they were asked that made them feel very upset, that they felt were inappropriate throughout the process, or things that were said to them. Are we addressing this from a diversity standpoint as well? And because we don't really have any formal diversity training right now, out of sometimes a 1 hour for new teachers, how are we addressing for the instructors in the program and staff in the program diversity?
I think where we began to address that in 2 places primarily, and we will continue to do that. I don't think you're ever going to arrive to that place, right? I think it's going to be a continual progression. But the first place we addressed it is in our philosophy. That was a huge, huge, huge concern for us. The committee members were very committed to embracing diversity and that all students have access. And so then it's represented in our philosophy. The second area you will see that we attempted to address it 100%, and we're in a compromise right now, is by moving away from the in-view. The in-view does have its biases. We have it in place right now because we don't want to disrupt until we implement in January, but the NNAT is a nonverbal. It really takes into consideration all diversities, all cultures, all backgrounds, socioeconomic, and again, access to early education. So that is why we moved to the NNAT, for that reason. So I think those were the first 2 areas that we really looked at addressing diversity and making sure that all students have access to gifted education when they demonstrate the characteristics. Professional development absolutely will be included, etc.
That's great. And just one final comment on that, and that is, you may wish to consider, too, for the parents of the kids who are being screened through this, to maybe to have another component, whether it's an exit survey or something, where they can provide information and feedback in a non-threatening way that can also provide great data for you as you continue to develop this. And that's all I'll say. I'll just say, really amazing job by everyone. I am so totally blown away. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Mendez. I just wanted to add, you answered part of his question, but we do have diversity training every year, and it's not just an hour. We actually even have diversity training for our athletic staff. So, Mr. Robertson, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. That started several years ago, and our faculty and staff also have AMISAD training at Montclair State, and I believe this year it's at Kean University. But I would love to have the public get an opportunity to ask questions as well. And I know Mr. Charles still has questions, and Mrs. Lab has her questions as well. So I know it's 10:30, it's getting late, and the public's anxious to come to the microphone. So Mr. Charles, Mrs. Lab?
I just have one question, real quick. How were the parents selected to be part of the committee? That's all.
Mr. Rutsky?
There were parents who signed up in a special email that were offered to sign up, and we, again, there's someone looking for all the schools to be represented. Parents who had maybe elementary and middle school students, that kind of thing. There was one parent who was selected who could not do it, and she was the only one. So the parent, very similar to what's been done in the past.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you. That's all, Madam President.
Thank you. I believe there was also a committee sign-up on WOBO, so parents could have signed up that way as well. Okay. Mrs. Lab.
Thank you. I just have 3 questions and points really on operational aspects of the program. One, I guess it would be an administrator's nightmare regarding scheduling. You indicated that the kids will be going once a week in the morning, so my concern is, will they be missing art every week? Will they be missing gym? I mean, again, the scheduling that you guys have to do is a jigsaw puzzle, and just a consideration for that, because on the other end of the spectrum, I know my son missed a lot of stuff going to therapies, and it was a drag. Secondly, another comment or concern, I guess, would be the extensions. I just want to ensure that it's not just additional work, not more ditto sheets, more busy work, that it's replacing something, not in addition to, so the kids are not inundated with, now I have 20 ditto sheets instead of 10 because I'm in this. And finally, when it is embedded in the younger grades, how does it affect the Marzano evaluation plan? Because now the teachers clearly are teaching another aspect of education. So would it be into a different domain that they currently are not being evaluated on? So again, I don't expect an answer right now, but just a consideration for the evaluation plan now that they're now teaching something on a different level.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We have some answers for you now.
All right, let's hear it.
What we do.
Oh, we do? That's news to her, but all right.
All right. The scheduling, the principals, they're magicians. They figure it out.
Okay.
But we meet with them, and we will do so. We've started the discussions. They've all received these program guides, and they've given feedback into them. We will meet with them, and they will, as always, really be considerate of all of the students and see how to best meet their needs without pulling them from one subject, right? Our right now plan is to service them in their classrooms. So it's just a small group, you pull, you service, unless we're doing like peers again, then we'll do that differently. The curriculum, again, we're developing that curriculum, and no dittos, no handouts, performance-based tasks, high-level learning, really looking for students to think critically, problem solve, work through the thinking, and come up with their own solutions. We have not considered the Marzano evaluation as it relates to gifted, and so then that's something that I would have to bring back to the committee to work through.
Thank you.
Okay, any final questions for Mr. Mendez?
I actually have an add-on, but it's for Ms. Soriano. Just one quick one, very quick. Tonight we're adopting the animal behavior science text. And I just wanted to know if you considered, with adopting that proposal, reaching out to the various veterinarians in town, and I'm thinking in particular of the one right around the corner in Eagle Rock, to incorporate some real-world learning with that part of the
Yes, with that new course, we would like to really look to the community. I mean, we have Turtleback Zoo right in our backyard.
Yes.
I'm hoping if there's some type of connection we could make, whether someone visits us or we have some opportunities there, that would be most helpful, I think, in helping students get that real-world connection.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, if we can just open up
Sure.
to the public for just the two presentations, science and G&T,
Yes.
and that way this group can go ahead and head home.
Yes, if anyone from the public has questions regarding either program, please come to the microphone, state your name, address, and there's a clock with 3 minutes on it, just to allow everyone to have an opportunity to speak. Mr. Scott.
Good evening. I'm Brent Draper Scott, and I reside at 75 Nestro Road here in West Orange. I served as a member on the Gifted and Talented Committee and was pleased to work with Superintendent Rusky and with my son's principal, Mr. Akirio. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we as a committee discussed that were left out of this presentation tonight, and that's very disappointing. I would encourage the board not to approve the map tonight because I think more West Orange residents, more voters need to know about this plan and weigh in on it. There's just too many loose ends. As a minister once said, it is more difficult to unlearn something that you've already learned that's wrong than to learn something new. And rather than put something in place that is halfway finished like this is, and then have to go back in January, start with a new committee and fix this and fix that, I think that's a problem. For instance, the in-view, as Mr. Mendez pointed out, and as we pointed out at the various hearings, committee hearings, it's a biased exam. It doesn't work very well. My son passed the NNAT in New York at 98. He passed Niglieri in New York at 99, and he didn't do well on in-view at all. Don't ask me why. During Mr. Mendez's presentation, I used my cell phone to Google New York and embargo on Niglieri and couldn't find anything, no matter how I put it in there. There's no news that I could find tonight on New York blocking any other state from using that exam. So I'd like to get some clarification on that. I would also point out two things, and I understand that the board president pointed out that there is training. One of the things that I brought up that is very important to me is bias training. A Yale study came out just last year pointing out that bias is not just a policing problem. It's a problem from grade K. Actually, it starts in pre-K. Specifically educational bias against black males. And Yale, not Yale, but Harvard and Stanford also came out last year pointing out that there's great bias against girls in gifted and talented education. So rather than have this town start something that is new, and I worked with the superintendent, and I worked with my principal, and I worked with Mr. Mendez, this has far too many loose ends. I would not implement something this unfinished. I worked on the board. I was glad to work on the board. I believe I wrote a member of the Board of Education letting them know that nothing's ever going to be perfect, and we did work very hard. But this is unfinished business. This is very unfinished, and I would implore you to not pass the MAP tonight because undoing something or correcting something that has this many loose ends could be harder going forward into January and starting over. You could actually end up doing more harm than good, and I would encourage you as my elected representatives to put a hold on that. Thank you.
Hi, Rachel Gordon, 8 Meeker Street. I just had a few really quick questions. So if this, the gifted presentation is going to go up on the website tomorrow, I could have heard that wrong, but it seems like they're meeting again Wednesday, June 14th. So that would be 2 days for me, if I was not at this meeting, to be aware of it was even on there, and then it just seems like there's not enough time for public to actually make comments. I know that people who had been, gifted parents told me that they who are already in the program were invited to get a preview of the program, which is great for them, but I think there should have been something before for the whole public, because there's people who are interested, and if they choose to come, I think they should have been allowed to. And then I'm very confused about the tests, and maybe having it actually on the website and being able to see it will clear this up. But it seems like more tests, not less, but I could be wrong about that. And then what about children who who refuse park? So therefore, would they be unfairly disadvantaged or pressured to take it so that they could be considered in the gifted program? That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Natalie Hurd Hackett, 35 Colonial Woods Drive. I have a few questions that seem to have been answered through the night. First, I'd like to congratulate the committee on your hard work. I really appreciate Mr. JROTC's leadership and the team for pulling this together. My daughter is in 5th grade in the HAP program, and she's planning on going into 6th grade, and we are one of the undecided parents. After multiple conversations with numerous administrators in the district, I'm still undecided. We are being told to place her in the honors program and take her out of the HAP program, and that we're being told that the HAP program is better. The honors program is better. So that's where I have my concerns. Why is it that we're being told that the honors program is better? And it's not enough for me to hear that in September they're going to start making changes, or possibly January. I need to be able to make the decision now, and that's what's concerning me as a parent. It would be great if parents could have a parent meeting, the HAP parents, if we could have a meeting to just have some of our questions answered, to find out what exactly the curriculum looks like. But from what I'm hearing, there might not be a curriculum. So just we need to know what it is that our children are entering into, what they're going to experience, what the differences are between the HAP program or the gifted program and the honors program, and what they will be losing, because that's what I'm hearing, that if she does enter 6th grade in the HAP program, then she will be at a setback for 7th grade. So, and then also, and this is one thing that's been pressing me for years, have you considered increasing the frequency of the program? Instead of pulling the students one day a week, maybe even spending a full day, because the transients is a lot for small children, especially 2nd graders. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hackett.
Do we still do the whole name and address thing for this part? Or Sue Freevald, 10 Ridgeview Avenue. Real fast. For serving on the committee for parents, I believe that was the question. It says it was offered in a special email. I'm assuming that was only sent to certain parents and not to everyone, and I'd like to know who selected which parents were offered to serve. And as far as gifted and talented go, for the twice exceptional students, those who are both gifted and also have disabilities, can kids with IEPs be considered for gifted and talented? If we're deciding now with the principal, the general ed teacher, and the gifted and talented teacher, can the gifted and talented teacher come into an IEP meeting and the IEP team make that decision, and placement in G&T be decided as part of the IEP? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. Okay. Mrs. Dementis, Mr. JROTC.
All right, I'll start from the last to the first. Ms. Freevold, the email was sent to everybody and was on the website as well. for several weeks to go ahead, and if they wanted to be considered to be on the committee, then they could go ahead and send that to this special email, which was then evaluated by individuals who want to be on it. Again, it's a very, very simple criteria. We're looking for representation across the schools and parents who were lucky enough to have children in elementary and middle school, which could bring both aspects to the committee. As far as twice exceptional, I didn't catch all of what you were saying at the end, and certainly we can talk about that, so I understand exactly. But yes, of course, students of twice exceptional can be considered for the Gifted and Talented program. Mr. Hackett, when we're done, if you're still around, if not, maybe we can touch base tomorrow. I'd like to know who's telling you this information about the honors versus the HAP versus providing both of the options of what honors is, what HAP is in the 6th grade, and then letting you make an informed decision. So if you're not around later, hopefully we could talk tomorrow so I could get that information. The issue with HAP parents invited to come in, there was a special letter that was sent out to them, and it wasn't, Ms. Gordon, this kind of answers, it wasn't just to preview the Gifted and Talented changes. It was to receive their feedback so we can incorporate that information into our thoughts as far as the new program and the revised program, as well as it's going to be available for everybody to have input. As you heard from the presentation with the committee, this is the first opportunity to present, and collecting feedback along the way informs us of things that we can consider prior to that final presentation. Now, what's important, and we've said this for a long time now, is because you adopt something and you board approve something, it doesn't mean that that's etched in stone forever. And if we find that something needs to change, then obviously we'll make that adjustment because the idea is to have the best program possible, which should be something that's evaluated every single year. And as far as the frequency, I know there was conversation, Mr. Hackett, about the frequency, and I know that is with the committee, and they're considering looking at all of those options, and I believe they'll be doing that next year as well. The Ms. Gordon, the issue of the website, again, going on there tomorrow is the opportunity for people to provide feedback. As far as the June 14th, again, that was to gather more feedback from a different group of current HAP parents, but it doesn't mean it's limited to just getting feedback from them. We will obviously want to get feedback from everybody and understand how that feedback would fit into what we're proposing as the revisions for the G&T. As far as the test, we'll go over that one more time. And children who do not take PARC, that we talked about that. We would not hold it against a child who didn't take PARC, but we would be able to utilize the PARC results for those that did. So we understand there are parents who do not want their children to take the PARC. Mr. Scott, as far as unfinished business, yes, where's Mr. Scott? There's always unfinished business anytime we're doing work with any kind of program, and that's what I said earlier about going back and really looking at every program every year and evaluating the effectiveness and putting a tool in place that allows us to determine the effectiveness. As far as the bias training, and I've said this several times to you, that's absolutely a priority for this coming school year and how we do it. We want to make sure that we have diversity-trained bias training, and I agree with what you said in those studies you're referring to. I'm very familiar with, and you're absolutely right. And we just need to make sure we're able to implement training that is effectively done, and so we can reach across and then do follow-up to that. We don't want to do a one-hit wonder and then we don't talk about it for another year. We want to make sure that it's planned out well and the presenters are very effective, and then we can have follow-up throughout the year to make sure we're understanding, because it's not just about educating, it's about educating and then how does that show up in the classroom every day. So there's a lot of that has to be done. But that diversity and bias training will absolutely be a priority for the beginning of next school year. We have found that there is an embargo on NTA, and we'll figure out where that is so we can show that to you tomorrow. We'll get that information to you, so you have that. I disagree with your recommendation for not approving MAP. This is not a decision that was made by Mr. Mendez, myself. This is a group of teachers of all subjects and grade levels, etc., working with other administrators in the district who found that this is going to be an effective tool to help us provide quality assessments and, most importantly, get immediate feedback on how students are doing, so then we can adjust instruction around the needs of each child. So I do believe it's important, and I do recommend that we approve this tonight. And I do want to thank you for serving on the committee as well. I know parents are very, very busy, and coming out, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, waiting and working for a couple hours on a regular basis is a huge commitment. So a lot of thanks to all the parents and certainly to the committees here tonight. And thanks for coming tonight. I know it's a late night. It's important that everybody understands how much work went into doing this. Ms. Mordecai.
Thank you, Mr. JROTC. Okay, now we actually have the rest of your report, Mr. JROTC. Alyssa Drive.
Yes, and we'll go through this very quickly. I'm going to jump over Alyssa Drive for a minute because I know that there's a couple board members who want to talk about that. Just the strategic plan year 1 report, we will be presenting that, and I wanted to make it public so everybody could understand it, next board meeting, which we will confirm before the evening is done, or we'll report out tomorrow when we get a confirmation on the next June board meeting. We will be presenting the strategic plan year 1 report. It's a very large document, but we will be doing that next board meeting. And tied in with that are all the district assessments. So both of those will be discussed and reported out at the next board meeting. Alyssa Drive and PVW, and then I'll go back to the HIB report.
Mrs. Lab, would you like to start, as you were the senior board member who's been fighting for Alyssa Drive for almost 10 years?
It's been fun. Yeah, no, the board has been looking to have a traffic light at Alyssa Drive as long as I've been on the board, which goes back to 2008. There were many impediments, obstacles, but all that aside, it's happening, and we're very pleased that it's happening. We had met with Len Luciano, who's a freeholder who represents West Orange. He came to the high school intersection of Alyssa and Pleasant Valley Way at dismissal, and unfortunately Ms. Mordecai couldn't make it that day, but I was there with the superintendent, the high school principal, and freeholder Luciano. He got to see for himself what happens when our drivers our baby drivers try to exit that street. Due to the topography, you just cannot see. And of course, kids being kids, we're looking at them, and they're trying to look cool, and they're on their cell phones, and they're changing stuff around. And seasoned drivers have a very difficult time going out of there because it's a blind street. You just cannot see. Regardless, both the township, the Board of Education, and the Essex County freeholders have cumulatively decided that we will be splitting the cost of this traffic light. Actually, Mr. Charles and I attended meetings with the Pedestrian Safety Committee that Roz Moskowitz started a number of years ago, and Ronnie, who has a lot of experience with the county, at the time, 2 years ago, said, do a resolution, and that is the only way it's going to get on their agenda. And unfortunately, we found out that the township never did do a resolution. So the board did a resolution, then the town did a resolution. Anyway, bottom line is, Sandra Mordecai and myself and Councilwoman Michelle Castellino, former board member, we actually went to the freeholder meeting. Orange, is that where we were? In Orange, and we thanked the freeholders, and in fact one of the freeholders is a former high school teacher here, Pat Siebold, and Pat was saying how difficult it was for her to get out of there. So regardless, Sanjeet, and I can't remember his last name. Ronnie, do you know Sanjeet's last name? The traffic guy from the county?
He's the director of public works.
Okay. He said it should be in, they started the groundwork for it already. They're hoping that it actually gets there before the new year. We thought it was going to be after the new year because the county's fiscal year starts January 1 versus ours, which is July 1. But anyway, we're keeping our fingers crossed that we get that light sooner than later. We do know that it's going to have some type of sensor on it. So like, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be stopped at a red light for no good reason. And it'll be kind of like the lights by Kmart where it's just like yellow and off you go. So I do want to thank the Pedestrian Safety Committee, Roz Moskowitz, all the committee members who have been there through the years, and thank the town council and especially the freeholders for, hey, seeing the light. No, I'm kidding. It's late. I'm getting punchy, but that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lab. The entire board thanks the county and every member of the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Board for all their hard work on this. And as Mrs. Lab said, it's been a 3-year journey for the advisory board, but for Mrs. Moskowitz, I know it's personal for her, and her father was killed on Pleasant Valley Way in a pedestrian accident over 17 years ago. So she's been fighting this battle for 17 years. So, Mr. JROTC, HIB report?
Yes, I gave the HIB report. Just take a moment, see if you have any questions.
Sure. I have no questions, Mr. Rusky.
Okay.
It's changed. There's such a high. Is it just the end of school?
We see patterns on a yearly basis that, May there's some issues we deal with, but overall, when you're looking at the total number that were investigated, there's a lot that did not turn out to be. Yeah.
Five
No, I'm
yeses.
just saying the fact
For the
that
month
it
of
was
May.
reported.
That's true.
Yes. Mr. Robertson, any questions?
None at all.
Mr.
Thank you.
Schwartzbaum?
No.
And Ms. Lab? Okay. Lastly, just
Thank you.
very quickly, and then we'll just want to share a couple things. The high school boys step team placed 4th in the 2017 National High School Stepping Championships in Harrisburg. As we all know, they are a phenomenal team. Work very, very hard. Very happy that when they placed 4th, I know that they wanted to place 1st. Obviously, they're disappointed, but 4th nationwide is also well done. We also have some recognition for Ryan Del Gershio. He received a prestigious award, Excellence in Education Award, for a lot of the work that was done with Leader of Light. We all know about Leader of Light, all the work that we've talked about, all the things we've talked about. So I want to recognize Mr. Del Gershio, not only for that, he just does a phenomenal job at his job, and the technology and engineering program has some just terrific teachers, and they work really, really well. And we're pushing a lot of that down, and a lot of things happen at the middle school level, and we'll continue to push down. So we're doing some of that good technology and engineering at the elementary levels as well. The high school Fight for Green Club students received a certificate of appreciation at the Teens Kids Awards at the zoo, as well as the Open Space Award, tree planting at Mount Pleasant. So I just want to recognize them as well. And then lastly, all the moving up ceremonies, the promotional ceremonies are on the website. And obviously the biggest one is our high school commencement, which is next Thursday. All right, it begins at 6 o'clock. And it is on Soriano Field, fingers crossed with the weather. If not, we'll be inside, yes. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. JROTC. Now it's time for questions on the agenda from the public. If you have a question on an agenda item, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and there is a 3-minute timer.
Sue Freebald, 10 Ridgeview Avenue. Okay, there you go. First and foremost, really fast, I noticed there's an OT in Gregory Redwood who's going on leave until December, and I don't see a substitute OT in place, and that has been an issue. So I'd like to know who's covering that till December. And as the board knows, I've contacted you all about the spec ed policy that's supposed to be passed on second reading tonight. And it is a policy that is full of errors. These are not formatting problems, as I've heard rumors of. These go beyond that. There are typos. There are major errors. There's a non-sentence on page 1. There are 3 bullet points under the wrong heading. There's a sentence that doesn't make any sense because it says that parents can submit child study team reports to the child study team, which is ludicrous. This is just a poorly written kludge of a report. It's consolidating a lot of things into a single policy. Now, apparently this came verbatim from NJSBA. I'm rather disappointed to find that as early as a couple days ago, only one of you has admitted to actually reading this policy. That would be Ms. Lab. And apparently with her review and Mr. Rutsky reviewing it and the NJSBA reviewing it, still my middle schooler can find the non-sentence on page 1. So from what NJSBA has told me, you guys are supposed to pass it tonight, and then we'll go back and fix it. And as someone has already said, it's much harder to undo than to do it right in the first place. It's already late. Take the time to do it properly. This quotes so often from the code and repeats it so often that you might as well just quote the entire code right there and be done with it. Instead, it's repeated. It's a mess. And for some reason, policy is a major role for the board, and if you guys are not going to take it seriously, then I don't see why we should take you seriously. This is something that you should be doing. It is your responsibility, not the superintendent's, not the NJSBA. So what I was told by the NJSBA is that this board is very careful in its oversight of the district, and yet that same person told me that you were expected to pass this policy full of errors tonight and then revise it later. If you weren't motivated to go over it carefully before first reading and before now, then why should we think you're going to go over it carefully later after it's already passed? So I urge you to please table this, go over it, and do it properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Strickland. Mr. Ron.
Alice Ron, 546 Valley Road. After reviewing, correcting, and pretty much comparing the special education policy to go to second reading tonight, and communicating with the Board of Ed members, is beyond sad to frustrating, to say the least. To see after you, Sandy, Laura, Roski, the Roski secretary, in his behalf was talking, the consultant from NJSBA, believe is a responsible act to pass tonight policy, even when all the people have mentioned it before, has even indicated they have no time to read it. Or had agreed that clearly some of the corrections they need to be put in place and need to be made. With this, with only the promise of no worries, after we pass it tonight, we will revise the policy. After it's passed, really? My question to you guys is the following. Since when special education students are part of a new meaning that only you guys can put as a second citizen? Because every single policy that you have reviewed, you review it, you approve it, and you all are in agreement. You all know that this one has major problems. But no, it's a special education student. It's a second class for each one of you. So let's vote for it, right? Is that the new meaning? I want to know the answer of that. Because this, we're going to pass it today, and we revise it later. It's not only but an act, a responsible act of each one of vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Durand.
Hello, Cindy Matute Brown, 24 Coral Slover Grove. I came here tonight to share some familiar concerns with you as it relates to the teacher and staff morale. While some may be of the opinion, and sadly, I've had the displeasure of hearing from one of you personally.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is on agenda items only.
It's not public comment?
No, it's not.
This is time number 2 that I do this. I will be back again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Brent Draper Scott, and I live at 75 Nestro Road here in West Orange. Thank you very much, Mr. JROTC, for addressing my concerns, and I appreciate it. And I would like to reiterate it was a pleasure and a very positive experience to work with you and to work with the other members of the Gifted and Talented Reform Committee. It truly was. I still feel that there are too many loose ends here for this board to vote for the map tonight. I don't think enough voters in the city of West Orange know enough about this to have this committee of elected representatives pass something that they have not weighed in on that is going to be placed upon their children. And I think there's entirely too many things in here that getting started on it, you would have to undo and refix and refit and reshuffle. And that is a very bad way to start on a new policy. I got involved in this because my son came from a district where he was in New York City in the Gifted and Talented program. And he came here and he wasn't, not because he wasn't good enough, but because the program didn't come all the way down to second grade. So I'm hopefully we can fix that and get that straight. That's primarily was my concern, to be a part of the community and try to do something to make something better. And I think that the committee is trying to do that. I think Mr. JROTC is trying to do that. I think Mr. Mendez is trying to do that. Unfortunately, this is unfinished business. And to put something through, you don't move a family into a new house that's supposed to be a two-story house with only one story has been built. This is unfinished business. I particularly have problems with one aspect that we talked about in the committee. For instance, my son was already in Gifted and Talented in New York. You're thinking about using the test that New York uses to put him in Gifted and Talented here. When I recommended that if a child comes from a district that he or she is already in Gifted and Talented, they should just be accepted into the West Orange Gifted and Talented program. And they're going to learn what the pros and cons of that district are, and their child is either going to succeed or fail within it. And that was not considered, unfortunately. If a child comes into this district from the third grade, he's going to go to the third grade. There's no retesting him or her to see if they're good enough. There's no need for that. One of the teachers, unfortunately, suggested that if we do that, they will just invade our schools. And I have to admit, I winced when she said that. She spoke this evening. I utterly winced when she said that. I don't know what she's imagining or what invasion she's imagining, but this board might want to ask her. At this time, again, while I greatly appreciated working with the superintendent and with fellow parents, with my son's own principal and with other educators, at this time, this is very unfinished business, and I would encourage you not to pass MAP tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. JROTC? Mr. JROTC?
I'll start with Mr. Scott and again work backwards. I think it's something that the committee needs to discuss about whether students in another program, another district. The only concern I see, where's Mr. Scott again, is that districts may not have the same standards that we do, but I think that's certainly something that can be brought back up for discussion. That's the biggest concern I see. Address the other issues we talked about before. I want to invite Mr. Mendez and Ms. Salabino up to the microphone for a minute because the three of us did a lot of work on the policy, and we worked obviously with Ms. Lab on this, but there are some things that were also done again today that I'd like to discuss to make sure that we're clear. Before we start talking about it, I want to make sure that everybody understands this, that we're not just passing something tonight and then going to revise it. All right? That's never a thought. But to be clear with everybody in the public, the way the process works is you have a first reading, and the first reading gets posted for parents to provide input. When it's posted, which it was posted a month ago, this policy, for people to go ahead and look at and provide comments. That's the purpose of it, so they can give feedback. So before we go to the second reading, we can see what that feedback is and consider putting that in. Now, the issue is that the attorneys down at school board are, excuse me, excuse me. So the issue is that we rely on New Jersey School.
One at a time, please.
We rely on New Jersey School Board Association with their attorneys and their policy committee to provide the feedback to the district. The district then, and this is where Ms. Lab and comes in, and then she works with me and other administrators or other individuals in the district based on the policy itself. We then determine, is there anything that needs to be changed specific to West Orange? In this situation with this particular policy, this is specific to the code. There's not a lot that's specific to West Orange because it's very specific to address certain things, as we've talked about in the past. So I've heard Mr. Rond and Ms. Friedfold say that we're just putting this through tonight and then going to make changes to it. This is where I want to bring up Mr. Mendez and Ms. Salambino to talk. I gave you a document. One of the documents shows the conversation from New Jersey School Board, and specifically Jean, who we work with and Ms. Lab works with very closely, as well as, those are her comments, as well as what we did by looking at the feedback from Ms. Freevold and determining, and that's your other document that has yellow highlights. And you can see, and I'll give you an example on the very first one on the first page. Ms. Freevold's comments were that, there's some errors in editing as far as there should be a few commas. We agreed, we put commas in. It was, simple. But there's other things in there that are very specific attorney language reflective of the code that I am not going to change, nor are we supposed to change, because that's the purpose of the attorney and them writing the policy. So with that, let me turn it over to both of you. Talk a little bit about the process and specifically your interaction with Jean, please.
So on May 8th, the board conducted the first reading. Since then, we've received feedback on the policy, and we've gone through each piece of that feedback where we thought that we could make the revisions, meaning that it wasn't illegal terminology being placed into the document. We've done that. For example, you have in the second reading the corrections and or inclusions of the revisions based on the community feedback. For example, the feedback was that there were verbs missing, etc. So this is written in a legal term. It is verbatim NJSBA. When we sought their advice, they said, fine, we could change or add the verbs or add the commas, etc. to make it those sentences that were referred to. So we did. Free appropriate public education is made available to each eligible student, begins no later than the student's 3rd birthday, and an individualized education program will be in effect for the student by that date. So anything throughout the document that was in legal terms and or not in complete parent-friendly sentences, we went through the document and you have those updates. When it speaks to specific things that were legal, we did not change those. We submitted them back to NJSBA, and Jean walked us through each piece. She told us what we could change and what was straight from code, and we followed that recommendation. Ms. Salambino can go through what the process is at NJSBA for their vetting and who authored the document.
Over here, one of the things that we had asked is, prior to the document coming into the district, what does school boards do on their end? Who are the illustrators of it? Who oversees it? Is there a committee process? Very interesting. I'm trying to find the exact place. According to school boards, they have a policy consultant which reviews the changes in statute and code, and the existing related critical policy and legal references on the reference list. The consultant applies the changes, creates an updated version of the policy and the legal references for the new policy. When that is completed, it goes to the NJSBA's legal department for their review. So they assign attorneys to check the updates against the statute and the code for accuracy, and they investigate the relevant case law and the commissioner decisions if it's applicable to any changes. At that point, they then go through a meeting to discuss the policy revisions and look for the larger changes. The attorney edits or added to the policy. The policy is proofread by the policy manager there. It's then finalized, published, and then districts receive this information. A few of the things that Mr. Mendez and I did when we were taking the feedback into consideration is we flipped back and forth yet again with the Blue Book. Sometimes it was a question of the language, and we went back and found where it was quoted in that manner in the code. It's not up to us to change that wording at all. In places where, and I will reference Ms. Freevold's comment, and I want to be specific, we added the language because we agreed when they were talking about the evaluations in the second reading, we specified outside of the West Orange District. Do you remember the page?
I believe that's on page
Page
7.
Then I'll read, if that's okay. No, the part I'm referencing. Your comment was for J. When conducting an initial evaluation or reevaluation, the reports and assessments of the child study team members or related service providers, we inserted for consideration outside of the West Orange Public School District may be submitted by parents and guardians. We inserted that verbiage to make it clear that these were reports being presented to the district child study team that had been obtained elsewhere.
Okay, so the point is that something like that, that's the purpose of the feedback from the community.
Yes.
So we can evaluate whether that's done or not. The majority of this policy is code, and this is why we have school boards. This is why they do what they do. They have attorneys who write this that know the law, know the code, and we rely on them to do it. So on another, let's take another policy, maybe it has to do with homelessness. We would contact the person who's in charge of homelessness, which is Cheryl Butler. She would look at this and determine if there's anything that should change. But again, any legal language is reflected that should not and does not change because that's coming from the attorney indicating it needs to stay in there. So we just want everybody, we want the public to understand that that's how it works as far as provided, we evaluate it. If we're not sure, we'll send it down to school boards to get their evaluation. All right, Ms. Lab?
Can you just speak to the error or the problem with the uploading? Because the document that I was working on did not have any of the grammatical or run-on sentences that Ms. Freevold mentioned, because I got mine direct from school boards. However, I understand when it was uploaded, there were different fonts. Could you speak to that, and then I'll continue a little bit.
As far as the glitches, that was an upload from a PDF into our website, and when it uploaded, some of the fonts changed, it moved things around. And so then all of those typos or glitches, those were fixed. And so then they're clean on the second reading, and we've taken that one down and replaced it. With the content, however, whatever feedback, we received feedback for pages 1 through 7, and so then for pages 1 through 7, then we took all of that feedback, went to the legal team over at NJSBA, went through each comment where we could, we adjusted, we made those revisions on your document. Where we're not, we left it as legal recommended from their team. And then the rest of the document, we went through it for making the language less legal. But I just want one more point that NJSBA said, yes, it's redundant. Yes, you will see it repeated over and over again. They said because the special education law is so dense,
And it does have very complex points that need to be made over and over again in certain sections. They placed them there on purpose, and so they did not suggest that we change that, but we did communicate that to them as a concern.
I'd just like to add one thing. While I'm not an attorney, but I will say the following, since I have testified numerous times in federal and state court, that I would caution changing legal language because it's normally relied upon for case law. So to the extent that there is a lot of issues and litigation and applications of case law when it comes to special ed. And if we go and start changing the legal language, then we open up the issue of, well, what was really meant by the case law versus the policy. So we have to rely upon New Jersey school boards and the case law and their attorneys to write the policy, so therefore we are bound by those rules and regulations and case law for students who need it.
So that's what she stated to us, and one of the examples was the point where a translator would be attained whenever it's feasible to do so. We were asked to consider being very specific about feasible and what does feasible mean. We went to the code. It's exactly that way in the code verbatim, and then their attorney said we cannot change that because of case law. It says specifically when feasible, and they gave several examples of why not, so we didn't feel within our authority to change it.
And terms such as feasibility and accessible and standardization, they carry legal weight while they are very nebulous and they're not well defined, but we have to deal with it because of the case law. That's the issue.
Those are standard legal phrases. Feasibility, that's a standard legal phrase. But also, I just feel that there was a question as well about repetition, and I know that this is repetitive because they first do an overview and then they go into the specifics of the language under the section. So it is repetitive, but that's on purpose. That's for emphasis, and that's for emphasis and clarification.
And then there are 7 additional policies that the district had where we spread this out over 8 different policies, this one plus 7 others. So as a part of this process, then the recommendation is if the board adopts the policy with all of the included policies, that we would abolish the other 7 because then we don't need to have 8 policies.
Let me just make a quick comment.
If we don't do it tonight.
Excuse me?
What are the implications if we do not pass this policy
As
tonight?
we said in the last meeting, we have to approve it for the special ed assurances. Now, again, if there was any thought that this is not up to speed for New Jersey school boards, then I would have been pulling it off anyhow. But when we talk to school boards, we talk to the attorney, we talked to Gene who handles all this, and they said this document there is nothing wrong with this document. Nothing. So there's no reason to pull it off. There's no reason to do anything. And remember, the other thing is that like any other policy, just because it goes through a first read and a second read, if we decide 6 months down the road we're going to tweak something, we can tweak it. We can go back to the process. There's no reason to change any of this language.
What's the timetable?
We have to approve it and submit it before June 30th because we've already submitted the statement of assurances saying that we will.
All right.
Mr. Charles?
So given that, I was trying to make a comment before.
Mr. Robinson.
Everyone has gone through an exhaustive process. I think there's no doubt between how we've utilized the partnership with New Jersey school boards. You fantastic ladies have gone through this in excruciating detail. Mrs. Lab is always very, very thorough. Mr. JROTC as well. I don't think that anybody doubts that this didn't go through an exhaustive process. But what I'm hearing tonight is that even in our best efforts, whether it's the technical glitch of the PDF going up and getting rearranged, that then breaks down what our communication is with the public and what their access is to be able to properly review whatever that second reading is. Number one. Number two, since we have until the end of June, let me just note, and I did read it. Thank you. I think all of us did. But let me just make a note that even on the revised version just a little typo, but in A there is one. If you read, free appropriate public education is made available to each eligible student begins no later, it either should be which is made available or and begins. So there's, I don't know if there are any other little typos and stuff in here. That's not a legal term. That there is an English, no, even with the correction, I read that. It's still not exactly constructed appropriately. So what I was going to suggest is, since we still have till the end of the month, what would be the harm in making sure that our citizens, that our public, have a chance to read the corrected document, and that we as a board maybe just take one more time and go through and make sure that this beautiful, wonderful document that is consolidated about 7 policies is what it should be, and do this once. What would be the harm?
Okay. The issue...
I'm making a motion to table.
I understand that. Okay, and well, okay, if you're making a motion, I'll stop until other board members respond.
I'd like to make a motion to table this. I'm sorry, continue discussion. My apologies.
This document that we received tonight with the yellow highlights, that is taking consideration of the feedback and speaking to school boards. Okay, so only, all right. And this was this posted today?
That piece is not, but the document that has the changes is the second version, the second reading. So this is so you could see with the yellow. This is not something we get posted like this. The normal gets posted. And again, so Mr. Robertson made a motion. I can't speak to it until after, if somebody seconds.
We're still in discussion phase, I thought.
We're still in discussion. My apologies.
Okay. So again, go ahead.
I just want clarification. What are the implications of not passing this by June 30th? Let's first go to the... Hear me out before you go, because most of respectfully to all of you, it sounds like most of these are not substantive, but are grammatical. So to the extent they are, so if they are, you all...
Mr. Schwartz.
Okay, fine, okay.
There should not be a... Mrs. Durand? Mrs. Durand? There is no back and forth discussion. Mrs. Durand, there's no back and forth. Okay, Mrs. Durand, thank you for your comment, but there's no back and forth with the board. The comments were already made at the microphone.
So what are the implications? What are the implications?
Okay, we have funding that is based on the special ed assurances, and a lot of it. All right, and two, we don't want to take the chance of something happening and then not having it approved. There is nothing wrong with this document. It's been approved by the school board attorney. It's been approved by Jean, who does policy, has done it for a very, very long time. We have looked through it. We're providing you with the document that has the yellow on it that shows where we've listened to the comment and we're making those adjustments. There's no reason not to approve this tonight. And again, like anything else, we're talking about a word. You can always change a word. It doesn't require a different, unless you're talking about a legal term, then you cannot change it.
Mrs. Lapp, do you have any comments?
In speaking with School Board Association, every school district that does utilize New Jersey school boards has passed this policy. The two districts that you referenced in an email, I think it was Montclair and Maplewood South Orange, they use Strauss Esme, which is another company. Again, I don't see a problem with this. I would recommend to the board to pass this. However, before we continue, I do want to make one personal note. It is wonderful to advocate for whatever your position may be. However, you cross the line when you go out on a 6,000-member group and speak of my husband's illness. That is outrageous. Your discretion is lacking, and I am furious. I am an elected official. Bring it on.
My husband, my family is off limits to you. You have crossed the line, Mr. Ron. Huge, big mistake. And I expect an apology, and instead of you standing there like you do. You don't speak about our families. And you did. You're not going to go into it? You put it out on West Orange Cares. I had people sending me emails. You put out my husband's health issues on 411. How dare you? How dare you? You are giving me permission to sit back because my husband's in the ICU? Are you out of your mind?
Laura.
Okay, order, please. President.
Thank you for your comment, Mrs. Lab. There's a motion on the floor. Mr. Robertson made a motion to table.
I'm still like.
Oh, you still have a comment? I'm sorry.
Whatever's question, what is just the funding is
The funding is huge. The things that have to be done as far as implementation are, that it's not just a pass it then put it in the next day. So yes, and again, why would we not think why would Mike Colbert, who is a very accomplished attorney with special ed code, why would we think he doesn't know what he's doing? When we talk to Gene, who we've used districts around the state for a very, very long time, when they say this is a very good policy, every district, why would we think it's not okay for West Orange? They are experts in this. Mike Colbert is an expert special ed attorney.
He's brilliant.
And Gene has been doing policy formatting for many, many years. These two are experts. I'm not sure if anybody else in this building is an expert, but I know those two are.
Thank you, Mr. Rutsky. Okay, let's move forward. Mr. Robertson has a motion on the floor.
Do not want to table this past the 30th. I would like to still get this done in the month of June, which is the deadline that we were supposed to observe from a legal standpoint, and it is my understanding that we are supposed to have another board meeting in the month of June.
Board members
So
on vacation, though.
I'm sorry. Well,
Vacation.
I'm sorry?
Yes, we are, but again.
So if we are going to have another board meeting in the month of June, and if doing it within the time limit is still appropriate and does not endanger us.
I disagree. It's not enough time to do what we need to do. That's the purpose of the policy being where it was and making sure that we had the first reading last and this be the second reading. So I disagree that we have plenty of time. You're not doing the work. The individuals standing at the podium have to do it, and it's a lot of work, Mr. Robertson.
I think I had to read it too. I'm not
No,
doing
I'm
the
not.
work.
I'm talking about the submission of the special ed assurances.
Understood. But if we have if the deadline, according to what you just said, is the end of the month, and we're going to have a board meeting in June,
We won't have a quorum. There are two board
We
members
will
who
not
have
have a
paid
quorum.
vacation.
We do not. That's the problem which we're going to discuss when we get to that point about
that's the issue.
another date, so we need to try and firm that up. But again, you can't rely on that. If something happens, now you don't have it approved, now you go into July, and we don't have the policy we need for the assurances.
We need to have a quorum for a board meeting, and so three board members would have to be available.
I
And
understand that. I know
yes.
the rules.
Okay.
I wasn't aware we wouldn't have a quorum for the next meeting.
Okay. So at this point, we have the board policy 6171.4, special education. We've discussed it. Is there a motion?
A motion on the table.
Yes.
Let me revise that motion. I'd like to make a motion that we pass it, but that we have a review of it at our first available meeting, whether that be within June with a quorum or the first meeting in July with a quorum, and that at that point, because the public did not have a clean document, that we again listen to the public, and because we have the right as a board to make tweaks, revisions, etc., that we revisit it again. So we pass it, but I'm making the motion conditional that we pass it, but that we also review it at the next board meeting where we have a quorum.
July 17th.
Well, the other thing that can happen is, as long as not substantial when they're minor, we're talking about a period, a comma, a word, whatever it might be, you can make those adjustments. You can pass it with that adjustment,
revisions
but you
tonight.
can't just leave it open,
I'm not
wide
leaving it
open.
open. I'm passing it, but I'm also making a motion that we review it again after passage to make sure, one, make sure our public has had a chance to review the new clean copy, which they did not, and two, to make sure that we have dotted our I's and crossed our T's, even as I've found a grammatical error in the first page.
Well, any
Okay?
revisions that you want to make tonight, we can pass tonight with those revisions. Have you given your revisions to?
Add the and before it begins, but my point is that there may be others, and we did not give our public an appropriate chance to read the clean document.
Okay,
So
but
I'm making a motion to pass, but I'm also making a
Mr.
motion
Robertson,
that we review
that's
again.
not true. This document has been there for a month.
No.
Okay,
The
I'm not-
revised
I understand, but
Mr. Rutsky,
you're not understanding the
please.
point of how this works.
I understand
First
the point of
reading
how
is
it
you
works.
provide input.
Mr.
Second
Rutsky,
reading is you. Hang on a
Mr.
minute.
Rutsky, I understand the process. That was not. Yes, I'm sure.
Okay. So the second
I understand the process
reading
of many of the
is
policies,
you take the
including the ones I brought
feedback
issue
from
with.
the policy and you include it or you don't. It doesn't mean because there's
I've made a
input
motion.
that you have to.
I've made a
accept
motion
the-
to pass it,
Okay.
and I've requested that we review it at the next board meeting where we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr.
you
Robertson.
Is
can't-
that understandable?
You cannot do that, is what I'm saying to you.
You can.
You-
You can make I can make a motion to review a document again,
Excuse
even
me, if
after
you're
passage.
both, if you're both speaking at the same time, the
We're not,
the
but
taping
I'm
for the
saying you
television is
can't,
very,
Mr. Robinson, you can't pass it for second reading with the understanding you're going to make changes to it at the next board meeting.
I said review it for the next board
Okay,
meeting.
reviewing it, it's fine. Again, if you're going to make changes, then you have to open it back up.
Mr. Rutsky, given that we have the chance to open it back up anyway, per what you've said earlier, the two are not mutually exclusive. So I'm making a motion to pass it, and I'm making a request to the board that we also review it again at the next board meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, and again, you don't need a motion to pass it. It's on the
Mr.
agenda
Rutsky,
to pass.
I'm making a motion that we move on.
Just so we're clear, though. Okay.
Jesus Christ. Save me.
is there a second?
Is there a second?
There's a motion on the floor, is there a second? There's a motion to,
Read the motion. What's the motion?
Wait, I want to hear the motion again.
What's the motion? Read
The
the motion.
motion is that we pass it tonight and that we add a review of it again to the next board meeting agenda. This will give our public a chance to review this clean second reading copy that did not upload properly. And it will give us a chance to make sure that the thing that we've passed is refined. So we pass it and we put it on the next agenda to review again. Is that a problem?
is there a second?
Okay. You can't pass it with the understanding you're going to make changes to it next board. You want to review it, that's fine, but that's no different than anything else
Then I
we
will make
do.
a second motion. I've made the motion to pass it, and I'll make a separate second motion that will be placed on the agenda again for further public discussion at the next board meeting. You can always change it.
You don't need a motion to place it on the agenda. We'll
Oh, I
just
do.
add it to the
I
agenda.
do.
No, there's no motion necessary to place an item on the agenda.
Actually, there is.
No, there
According to
isn't.
Robert's rules, you can do that. Let's go.
Is there a
Let's go.
second?
Let's do this. I'm not going to be here till 1 in the morning.
Please make a motion.
Let's go.
Please make a motion.
Do I get a second?
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second Mr. Robertson's motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Calavano?
So who seconded that?
Ron Charles.
So just as a clarification, just
Any
explain
discussion?
what we're voting on.
We're voting to approve the motion.
No, are we? Well, you understand, so
The
good. So get
policy,
up and
Mr.
say what it
Schwartzbaum.
is.
The policy. Policy.
Okay. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Calavano, roll call.
Mr. Charles?
I'm voting to table it, the motion.
So it's yes or no?
Remember, this is just public comment that they made. We're reacting to public comment. We have to go back into the agenda with personnel. No, we haven't done that yet. We got to do public comment.
We did the public comment. We're at the second reading.
Now we have to
We're
go
at
back
part
into the
6
agenda.
on the agenda.
Right.
Second reading.
We did.
We're on number 6.
We did. We're number 6.
We're on number 6.
Okay.
We did. We're in number 6.
Okay.
Right.
So Mr. Robertson has made a motion to pass
He has made
the
a-
policy.
There's more to his motion than that, though.
Yes, he just revised it.
Okay.
Mr. Robertson, can you clarify your motion? Mr.
Yeah.
Charles is asking.
That's what the secretary, it's not the secretary.
The motion is a two-part motion. It is to pass the file code 6171.4 second reading tonight and to put it on the agenda for next meeting for further public discussion. That is how I've structured my motion.
Okay, and I
Miss-
second that.
Thank you.
Any discussion by the board?
No. we've
Roll
killed
call.
this.
Roll call, Mr. Calabano.
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes.
And I
May I have a
apologize to
motion?
your son. Thank you.
So President Mordecai,
Continue.
I think we need to abolish the other policies now?
Yes. May I have a motion, please, to abolish the
I'll
7
make a motion.
policies that we've incorporated into special education policy number 6171.4?
I make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Calabano.
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes. May I have a motion, please, for personnel 1 through 4?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion by the board? I'd like to add my congratulations to Denise DePascal, who's retiring after 12 years at Roosevelt as a library media specialist. Is there any other comments on personnel?
No, thank you.
No, none.
I'd like to welcome Elena McFarland, who will be our Director of Transportation. And also Heather Carr, who will become the Interim Director of Personnel. Mr. Calabano, roll call.
Mr. Charles?
I am going to abstain from page 3, number 3. Yes on everything else.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes. Okay. May I please have a motion for curriculum and instruction 1 through 9, plus the addendum number 2?
I'll move that.
The addendum is for our track coach, Joe Picataggio, I never say that right, to attend the New Balance National Track and Field Competition in North Carolina.
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Any discussion by the board?
Yes. Regarding MAP, I hear what Mr. Scott was saying loud and clear. But I also want to make clear from a standpoint of policy that even if we approve MAP as a tool, it is not approving it in place of our approval of assessment test. According to the law, statute, New Jersey Department of Education statute 18A:33-1, which you've heard me say before, part of the board's responsibility in approving curricula is to approve the content and framework of assessment test. Not to scrutinize every single question, but to approve what is the content being tested on it whether that be for G&T, for honors, etc. And that is an outstanding issue. We're already in violation. I'm okay with approving MAP as a tool, but I want to make it clear as a matter of law and as a matter of 5 policies that we have that would intersect with this, that we are not approving blindly any assessment test that MAP is used to develop. We need to review the content, the framework of each assessment, and be shown how it interfaces with the curricula, how it is included in the curricula guides. And that is something we've violated before, and I want to make sure that we do not do that again.
Any other discussion by the board? Mr. Rutsky or Mrs. Mendez, do you want to comment on what Mr. Robertson has just said? I know we had a presentation on MAP about the beginning of this month, I think, May 8th. I'm not sure to what he's referring.
Not this meeting.
Okay. Mr. Calavano, roll call?
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes. May I have a motion, please, for finance 1 through 10? May I have a second? May I have a motion and a second, please?
I'll move special services
I'm
1
sorry?
through 10 and finance 1 through 3.
I'm sorry, Mr. Calavano?
I got it.
Okay.
We need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Any discussion by the board?
Nice donations tonight.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to say thank you
Very
for.
nice donations.
Yes, it's great our community steps up quite often and makes donations on a regular basis, and it's truly very appreciated by the board and the district at large. Mr. Calavano, roll call?
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
And President Mordecai?
Yes. Mr. Rutsky, just as a matter of process, we generally send thank you letters to donors.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Okay. May I have a motion for, let's see, D reports? Did I miss it?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion by the board? Roll call, Mr. Calavano?
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to table letter E, as we have not had an opportunity to discuss it. We were planning to meet with our board council. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Calavano, on the motion to table letter E?
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Mrs. Lab?
No.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Vice President Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
President Mordecai?
Yes.
Table.
Okay, now it's time for report from the board president and other board members. If my colleagues have anything to report on, I just have 2 items. I was very glad to attend the Redwood Carnival over the weekend. It was very hot, and of course, as usual, the principal was in the dunk tank, so a lot of students lined up, and I noticed there were quite a few good arms there, so we're building a nice softball and baseball team. I also attended the Gregory Strawberry Festival, and again, the principals got into, well, a few principals, including Mr. Fitzgerald, got into dunk tank, and that was also well attended, and it was a great day for both. But I'm confused why every single year both are on the same day. I know a lot of people would like to go to both carnivals to be supportive of both schools.
Briefly, I was blown away once again by the amount of talent and how well-rounded our students are, as I attended both the sports awards and the senior awards. And at the senior awards, I got to witness over $1 million in scholarships being awarded, as well as awards for various types of achievement. But across the board, it showed we demonstrated that we have many well-rounded students who are gifted student athletes, gifted students who are also amazing musicians. Our students demonstrated their talents and gifts in so many ways, and it was wonderful to see them recognized and properly awarded for their talents and efforts.
Mr. Charles?
In the effort of conserving time, I'm going to bank my minutes for next meeting. It's getting late for people still here.
Mrs. Lab?
Nothing.
Now it's time for petitions and hearings from the citizens. If you have a comment, please come to the microphone. State your name and address for the record. And there's a clock with us. 3 minutes.
I'm going to definitely be over 3 minutes, I'll tell you that. Well, is my time on? You know who I am. I'm Susan Pasquale, and I live at 22 Overlook Avenue. All I can say is, wow, my son got a great education tonight. That being said, I thought I was done at these Board of Ed meetings, coming out and representing the teachers, but unfortunately not. I'm here tonight again, hopefully for the last time in regards to the teachers' contracts. I thought this was resolved, and unfortunately, I hear that there's a discrepancy. I thought the teachers could finally rest and have a nice summer, but sadly not. My understanding is that there is a health care issue, and the health care issue needs to be corrected immediately, and that needs to be taken care of. We as parents and teachers cannot deal with this anymore. It has been over 2 years that these teachers have been working without a contract. It's a disgrace, and it should not be tolerated. I am not only a homeowner, I'm a taxpayer, and I'm a mother of 3 children in the West Orange School District. I'm also a graduate of the West Orange High School. If it wasn't for these teachers in the school district, I would have left a long time ago. Tonight is a perfect example. My youngest daughter, who is in 3rd grade, was here this morning, tonight, at Gregory, when Miss Asman was here representing what a wonderful job she does at Gregory with the children. She has been a dedicated teacher for over 25 years and truly cares about her kids. Thank you.
Cindy Matute Brown, 24 Corwell Circle, West Orange. I came here tonight to share some familiar concerns with you as it relates to the teacher and staff morale. While some may be of the opinion, and sadly, I've had the displeasure of hearing from one of you personally your extremely disparaging remarks and therefore attitude and perception of our educators and staff. This, coupled with the many experiences shared by our teachers, staff, and community members, I am dismayed and discouraged in your willingness to do much more than give lip service to appease those who share my concerns. I do not come to these meetings to be appeased. As some of you may very well know, I no longer have children in the district. I am a proud mother of successful children who went through this school district, and because of their success, I want the same for other students in this school district. I am also here to insist, or I came here to insist, that the board not pass on the 2nd reading. Unfortunately, that was done. And I'm taken aback, honestly, and I'm going to sway from this because I can't even continue to read. I am really taken aback at the display of what happened here tonight. You demand respect, but you give none, or you show none to each other. You want the teachers and everyone else to have a good morale, but you're not setting an example. There's no confidence here. You've positioned yourself in that regard, and by doing so, you position the superintendent in that regard. There's no confidence here. It's unfortunate that we have to sit here and witness this. And to you, Ms. Lab, if you can clarify, what did you mean by bring it on? This is a parent that you are talking to. However displeased you are, and we've all been there, this is not the forum to sound as if you are almost inviting an assault or giving one. That offense was disgusting, shameful. And the only apology I heard was one, and it didn't come from you. It's really embarrassing to be here tonight.
Rachel Gordon, 8 Meeker Street. I am talking there were more parents here earlier tonight, but as it's 11:30, many of them had to leave. But I'm giving an example of what the low morale I feel of the last few years has been by reading a letter from another parent who couldn't be here tonight. Dear Madam Board President and esteemed members, I respectfully add my voice to those parents and constituents who are calling for an immediate change of leadership in the office of West Orange School Superintendent. I do so because I do not believe that Mr. Rusty has the best interest of my children and other students in the town of West Orange on his list of priorities. If he did, it is hard to imagine a legacy of decision-making and management less compatible with those interests. After years of his tenure and multiple personal encounters with him in his office, I must say that his leadership has failed to live up to what was promised. While there are numerous examples I could cite, I will reference the beginning of the current school year when I contacted the administrators at Edison Middle School to advise them of and provide them with important court orders governing my primary physical custody of my children and the limitation placed upon my ex-wife with regard to retrieving them from the school or school activities. The orders, which were signed by the New Jersey Superior Court judge, made it abundantly clear that my ex-wife is not permitted to encounter the children at the school without my permission. After coming to a tentative understanding with Mr. Fitzgerald, the principal at Edison, I was later informed that Mr. Rutsky had ordered that my ex-wife would have full access without limitation, notwithstanding the order. He then proceeded to repeatedly avoid my calls and emails to further discuss the issue. I was unable to get satisfaction until I referenced to Mr. Rutsky through Principal Fitzgerald that my lawyer and the board attorney would need to discuss this further and that litigation was likely to arise. Suddenly, there was no problem with the school and the district followed the court orders. I have no faith in a leader who is so arrogant as to ignore judicial process without good cause. I have no faith in a leader who would ignore a concerned parent who contacts him in good faith to resolve a student safety-related issue. I further have no faith in a leader whose employees and fellow professionals universally hold him in contempt for his regard and repeated disrespect toward them. School leadership should be about safeguarding and educating the children and encouraging experienced and new teachers and staff to inspire their charges every day. It should not be merely about allocating resources in a way that pleases or impresses Mr. Rutsky's prospective employers, or the governor. In order for this district to reach its full potential, it is imperative that it move away from Mr. Rutsky's leadership and onto the leadership of someone with a demonstrable vested interest in the future of the district, its students, and our township. Mr. Rutsky is not a good fit for our community. Sincerely yours, Steve Savage. Thank you.
Susan Scarpa, 343 Gregory Avenue. I'm here on a positive note. I'm here to thank our principal of West Orange High School, Hayden Moore, Stephen Zakella, and the West Orange Mountaineers for their tremendous volunteer efforts with the senior citizens of our community. It is astounding. We finished the second pilot of our program that will be going on in the fall, and the love and the respect and the caring in that room today, if you could have seen it, you would have been so proud. You really would have. Those are incredible kids, and that they have incredible leadership. The West Orange High School Mountaineers exemplify all that's special about our schools. They welcomed our seniors into the Library Media Center to teach them how to use technology to enhance their lives. In terms of commitment, Mallory DeMarca conducted yoga classes for them. These are all volunteer efforts of people who just did this for our seniors because it's the right thing to do. They weren't being paid, they weren't being acknowledged, but if you saw the look on every one of those seniors' faces, the gratitude, you would really be proud. We have a lot that's special in our town. We really do. The Mountaineer Mentor Project leaders, Madeline Narduzzi and Megan White, under the leadership of Stephen Zakella, are just so enthusiastic about developing this program. And Mr. Moore embraced the idea of this intergenerational program with such an enthusiastic, compassionate, and deep understanding of the value of this for both West Orange High School students, and for the senior citizens. So I want us to leave here with something to be proud of. And I would like to thank you for your support when Mrs. Morelli came here 2 months ago to ask you for your support. And within 2 months, these people took the ball and ran with it. And I want all of us to be really proud of it.
Christopher Diaz, 20 Moore Terrace. I come to you tonight as a parent of a middle school student and to address the very important issues surrounding the development and implementation of the honors program in West Orange Middle School. For those who may not be aware, the Department of Education Statute 18A 33-1 states that, quote, no course of study shall be adopted or altered except by a recorded roll call vote of the Board of Education. This includes the content of assessment tests and program criteria. This question has been asked on numerous occasions, but what level of involvement has this board taken in the development and implementation of the honors program? It has been requested that a member of the board be permitted to sit on the committee that fashions the criteria for this program, yet this issue has failed to be included as part of at least the last 2 board agendas. While placement letters have gone out to parents, most of this board has remained silent. While the extent of board oversight may be open to interpretation, it is clear that no involvement whatsoever places this board in violation of Title 18A, Section 33-1. That violation has been ongoing for 3 years. Parents have asked repeatedly for data to support the efficacy of the district honors program. How have the students who have tested into the program performed as compared to the few who were admitted via appeal or the watch list? If indeed there is no difference, then would this not negate the viability of the placement criteria? And why on earth does this board stand by and support a program that places a mere 20% value on longitudinal student success when study after study has shown that this is the best indicator of academic achievement? Has the board been presented with data on prior or current honors program enrollment demographics and numbers for middle school and high school? To date, has anyone answered these questions? I know that some of these questions were posed by Mr. Robertson during open public meetings, and thus far, the response has been radio silence. I can tell you this, honors programs are not run this way in our neighboring districts. So I ask, what does this board intend to do to bring itself within the bounds of the statute on this issue? What level of involvement does this board intend to undertake? The parents of this town and the taxpayers who fund these programs deserve answers. But what do I know? I'm just a nerd.
Try not to be a nerd or a smart aleck up here today, but I have just a specific suggestion and then a comment, but I'll be really quick. My suggestion actually comes from my friend Nicole.
Sorry, the
Oh,
procedure,
sorry,
state your
Elizabeth
name and address.
Redwine, 10 Cobain Terrace. So my friend Nicole suggested one of the issues is, I think we can all agree, is that these meetings go on for too long. I don't think there's anyone here who wouldn't wish to be in bed, on the sofa, whatever. So my friend Nicole suggested maybe have the recognitions happen quarterly. By the time we get to the recognitions tonight, there's just a few of us here. So maybe, the public knows that there's going to be 4 board meetings when there's going to be recognitions. It just might be, there's got to be a way that we don't end up here this late. That's just one idea that came from my friend, not me. But when I heard it, I thought I got to get up and say that. And then secondly, respectfully, again, I've spoken to many of you individually. You all seem like very nice people, but something about this board is just not functioning well. I'm so sorry to say, but when you watch this board talk to each other, there are some major issues, and it doesn't surprise me that the contract hasn't happened, that there's been a lot of roadblocks, and respectfully, it's disturbing to watch not just Ms. Lab yell "bring it on" to someone in the audience, and I have no idea what happened, and there may be a legitimate issue there. I have no idea, but surely there's a better way to handle that. And even, which I see many, many times when I'm here, to see the superintendent say to Mr. Robertson, "You don't understand the process." I mean, who says that publicly in a meeting? To me, it's just very offensive and disappointing to watch. So I'm going to a meeting tomorrow. I go to meetings at my work. We don't speak to each other like this. And that's how we get things done. So I just respectfully request that you find a way to work together and work with the teachers, because you can't work with each other. Of course you're not going to be able to have respect for the teachers.
Sue Freevald, 10 Ridgeview Avenue. I never did get my answer to the OT question. I'd also like to thank Mr. JROTC. I'm apparently now an expert for the purposes of pages 1 through 7 of the Spec Ed policy. Apparently there are all these experts that can assure us that this policy was perfect except for everything that I pointed out. And like I told you, that was a partial list of pages 1 through 7. But we're supposed to believe these same experts that didn't see all of that somehow did just fine for pages 8 through 20. And Mr. Schwartzbaum, I assure you, I would not make this kind of a fuss over commas or typos or misspellings. We're talking about things underneath the wrong heading. We're talking about sentences where you heard Ms. Salambano correct one. And let's just be clear. Ms. Harkness, I assume it's a she didn't come into the picture at all until Friday afternoon, at which point she informed me that the board would be passing this policy and then revising it. This is why we were sure you were going to pass it and then revise it. And Mark, I thank you for fighting the good fight. I really do. I still think you should have tabled it completely, but the second Mr. JROTC says funding, even though none of you had any idea that funding was supposedly on the table, and none of you asked for any verification that funding was actually at risk, you assumed, oh my gosh, we better pass it now so we can all go on vacation and we won't lose lots and lots of money. Why is money suddenly on the table? This thing has been late for weeks, if not months. So I'd like to see some verification that funding is on the line and that this really couldn't wait until July. Either way, I am now an expert. And as an expert, I'm telling you, you're going to find more problems in pages 8 through 20. Yes, it's the code. You know what? They left parts out of the code. Under independent evaluations, the code says there's a 20-day time frame. We conveniently left that out. So parents who look at our policy don't know that the board only has 20 days to file for due process to deny an IEE. We left things out. Yes, there are places where I'd rather things were less vague, but there are also places where the code was simply not quoted properly. So you can either quote the whole code correctly, or you can go over your policy carefully, which you did not do. And Sandra, you could allow back and forth for the purposes of making this not go on in little bit by bit, us calling from the background. You know that we have substantive things here, and as board president, you could allow some back and forth so it can stay contained and respectful. Apparently, I am an expert. You should let me talk. So now we have this policy. It's wrong. You've passed it. Hopefully we'll revise it, but I see no reason to expect that all of the experts that missed everything before are going to find everything now. And I don't plan to go through pages 1 through 20 over again for all of you. And Laura, she took it down. She was not being mean. She took it down as soon as someone pointed out it was incorrect, and you were out of line to make a fuss about it. Thank you.
Robin Iserlis, 22 Yale Terrace. Good evening. Good morning, almost. Tonight I'm going to spend my 3 minutes sharing the reasons behind my request that you not renew the superintendent's contract. I first met Mr. JROTC at a meeting he convened at the Council of PTAs on the park exam in January 2015. At the time, I thought it was a good sign that the new superintendent was reaching out to a group of parent leaders in the community. However, my optimism was soon deflated when in the first few minutes he referred to those who opposed the park exam as the noise out there throwing strawberries. After the meeting, I introduced myself as the noise, adding that as an educator who reads, teaches, and conducts research on education, I assured him that this was not mere noise, but valid, thoughtful, and empirically sound criticism. While we may not agree with each other on the merits of park, it is not acceptable that opposition to it be met with derision. I did my best to write his behavior off as a rookie mistake. Willing to keep an open mind, I was again optimistic when in the summer of 2015, Rachel Gordon and I were invited to meet with Mr. JROTC and then board president Ron Charles after a very rocky implementation of the new middle school honors program. We were hopeful that he was truly interested in hearing different perspectives on the merits of the program, and we left the meeting with a plan to create a parent advisory committee utilizing the untapped resources of so many parent educators in our district. Rachel and I agreed to send him a list of parents for his consideration. We left hopeful that a partnership would be formed between the superintendent and a group of parents
invested in the education of our community's children. In fact, we were delighted when then President Charles announced the formation of this committee at the July 13th, 2015 Board of Ed meeting. Unfortunately, soon after this, the committee changed from the Parent Advisory Committee we had discussed to an honors committee focused solely on meeting one of his goals, that is the superintendent's, an honors program for students as young as 6th grade. And in response to a follow-up email I sent to him, he asserted once again in a demeaning, patronizing, even hostile manner, a different vision, his vision of what would transpire. I've attached the text of that email to these comments for your review. Perhaps as a way to appease us, Rachel and I were invited to sit on the first honors committee. But I've already talked about that in another meeting, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to close. As I've stated, this is more than just my story. There are countless examples where Mr. JROTC deflects challenges or questions that oppose his vision. Perhaps you misunderstand, or what you need to understand is he has done this to parents who have shared concerns with departmentalization, the honors program, the gifted and talented program, special education policies, discipline policies, and most egregiously, the Sandy Hook email. And he has responded this way to the West Orange teachers and staff who have stood before you to share their experiences. This does not invite an open dialogue, but rather evades responsibilities for concerns that will not be addressed. I do not know Mr. JROTC personally, so what I have shared with you tonight is not a personal criticism, but rather a criticism of his approach as the superintendent of our schools. I still welcome an opportunity to discuss these concerns with him or with any of the board members, should you or he be interested. But given all that I have experienced directly as well as being witness to, I do not think Mr. JROTC is the right fit for our community. I am just one person, but I am not alone, and along with my comments, I am presenting you with over 200 signatures of people so far in the community who feel as I do. I do hope you take this into consideration as you vote to renew Mr. JROTC's contract. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, broken. Ken Alper, 45 Colomar Terrace. Just a thought, idea, and an answer for something else. Having been to a bunch of meetings in the past couple of years or so, it feels like when there were 2 meetings a month, they weren't as packed, and maybe not for everyone, but for me, I felt like 2 meetings a month where you were done by 9:30 or 10 is way better than one that goes past midnight. So I would encourage the board to find a way to go back to 2 meetings a month if that's possible, so that they can be more reasonable in length. They're just too jam-packed. And Sandy, an answer, the Strawberry Festival and the Redwood Carnival, I think, used to be on different weekends, and then the town stole our weekend, it's probably Megan's fault, for Slide the City, and I think before that, the street fair. So we had to shift because we were losing too many people to the street fair, which is a great thing. I'm teasing about Megan. But as a result, they're now on the same day, so it's hard for people to do both. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Alper. Okay. Let's see. I know Mrs. Gordon read a letter from a parent. I know for a fact that the board attorney was contacted, and Mr. JROTC relayed the board attorney's response. That was not Mr. JROTC's response. Let's see. Mrs. Scarpa, yes, that's a wonderful program. I have already been getting feedback from quite a few senior citizens in the community, especially about the chair yoga. I was told the students are so gentle with our seniors, and that's really a good thing. And kudos to Coach Sakala and Principal Moore for implementing this so quickly. It's a great program. And in a few years, I'll be needing that program. Yes, we all will. Let's see. Okay, Mrs. Freefall, the reason we don't have back and forth is, number one, it's for process, but also it's very difficult to hear over the tape because we're taped for TV. And when there's back and forth and you're in the audience and not at the microphone, it's very difficult to hear. Okay, now, I know there are a few comments tonight about Mr. JROTC's contract. That is a personnel matter, and that will not be discussed in public. And Mr. Rutsky, could you please answer the questions about, let's see, about morale and the contract issues as well? And the honors program. Mr. Diaz had a question.
We'll start with the honors, or we'll start with the contract. Can't discuss a lot about the contract. There was a situation that came up last week that we needed to look into. The union president, Mr. Maniscalco, and the representative for the union met with Mr. Calavano and myself to provide those discrepancies, and we immediately turned that over to Horizon, and that's as far as we can go. We're working this week to try and get back together and get things resolved. It's very important to get it resolved. So that's where we are on that. As far as some of the conversations, the letter that was written, unfortunately, what was presented is not accurate information, but because it's a matter of the privacy law, we can't go any farther than that. So we can't make any further comments about the letter that Ms. Gordon read. The other issues with the honors, again, that's why we have committees, that's why we have parents on committees, that's why we have all the administrators, teachers, etc. on committees, so we can make informed decisions about things. Ms. Freevold, I certainly, your indication of an expert on policy, my statement was that there's nobody in this room that's an expert like the two down at school boards, including myself. So it wasn't, in a way that was being sarcastic. It was in a way that was saying that none of us have the experience that the individuals down at the school board have. This is what their job is full time, and both of them have been doing it for a very, very long time. So I have a lot of respect for both of them to make sure it happens. Again, Mrs. Schley's comments, there's a lot of things in there that obviously are not true as well, but we'll address them at a different time, not tonight. I think that's all I have, Ms. Mordecai.
I just have one more thing. Mr. Alper, you're absolutely right. We used to have 2 meetings per month. We went back to 1, but as you saw from tonight, we approved closing public meetings minutes for 4 meetings in May. So we actually had 4 meetings in May. So it's been a juggle, and we probably will go back to the 2 official regular meetings. But we always have meetings in between, whether it's for residency or something else. Residency or discipline. The recognitions being quarterly, this is the very last meeting of the school year, and we wanted to make sure that we got the students in to recognize them. So that's why everything was packed into this meeting. So I do apologize.
Is Ms. Scarpa still here?
Yeah, Ms. Scarpa.
So I heard it went really well, and thank you for coming up to saying that. They told me the Mountaineer, the volunteers, they're just outstanding, and they do such good work. And I heard that the senior citizens were really happy when they were in this room and doing their thing. Yeah, but I heard it went well.
Stuff.
Yeah, they're really great. Absolutely. But thank you for coming up and saying that.
Okay. Mrs. Lab, would you like to respond to the comment? I believe Mrs. Freefold mentioned an apology of...
First, I just would like to respond to Ms. Scarpa. Years ago, I know you've been in district a very long time, Karen Tarnoff used to teach our seniors over in that room, and it was a long time ago, but if you built it, they would come, and they used to come, and Karen was very patient teaching all of them. So it's nice that that void is no longer there, and I thank you for your initiative bringing this back, because it's just a nice thing to engage the seniors on many different levels, so thank you. It is absolutely not true that the board members did not know that funding was attached to this. I certainly knew that. To make a blanket statement that none of us knew this is incorrect. And as far as my own personal thing goes with Ms. Brown and Ms. Freevold's comments, I've been on the board now for 9 years, and I really don't lose my cool that
easily, and there's a lot of things that have been back and forth. So whether my response was over the top or not, you have to understand on a personal level, I have been under a lot of stress. And so to have, again, that disclosure to a base of 6,000 people who I do not know, I take exception to that. And whether you think that's appropriate or not, that's your call. But again, I needed to make that point that it was inappropriate, the lack of discretion. Shake your head, that's fine. It's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions. And so, anyway, it is a personal issue. Have a good evening, Ms. Freevold. Nice to see you. I'm good.
Okay. May I have a motion, please, to return to closed session?
I will make a motion to go into closed
Thank
session
you.
for matters of negotiation.
To discuss matters of negotiation.
No, negotiations.